Meeting procedures.
Sure.
Okay, give me 1 second. Welcome everyone. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you'll notice that you are currently muted and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for the committee co-chairs, Craig and Chuck, and any presenters as we move through the agenda. As we move through the agendas, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to the react icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button, not the wave or thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you are calling in on the phone, it is *9 to raise hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you need to go to the participants section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support. Thank you.
Why don't you go ahead, Mr. Carnegie? Kevin, can we unmute Joseph Kornacki? Go ahead. Yeah, I think you should be able to talk now.
Joseph, I think you're currently unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. We hear you.
Okay, right. Okay, this is a modification to a previously granted revocable consent for 177 East 64th Street to build a fence in front of their property 1 foot and 2.5 inches out from the property line. The modification, can I share my screen? Is that?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, hold on. Okay. Give me a second here if I can. Here we go. Okay. So
We don't see you on the screen.
are you seeing it?
No.
Oh. Okay. Let me. Okay. Oh, it says my screen sharing is disabled.
Kevin, can you let Mr. Kornacki share the screen?
The share screen option is on, so try one more time.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Okay. I prepared this drawing to
If you're unable to get it, maybe you could just send it to Kevin and he can
Put it up. Yeah, why don't you do that?
put it up.
Send it
All
to.
right. I will message you my email if you can send me the presentation materials there, and then I will put them up.
okay. It's this one particular drawing. I had previously sent this in, but okay. I'm sorry, how do I send this to you?
Um, so what format? Make sure you download the file and then you drag it into an email and send it to the email I sent you.
Otherwise, you may want to just try sharing the screen again. I just tried to see if I could share mine, and it seems like sharing is now enabled.
And I think, sir, you sent this drawing to us beforehand, so I'll just put it up. I think it is this one. Give me 1 second, everyone. It's this one, correct?
Not the right one?
That's correct.
Go ahead.
Okay, so this is the previously granted revocable consent. And it shows I don't know if you can zoom in on that a little bit. You'll see in the plan view, which is where my cursor is, the property lines are shown in blue. The adjacent fences for the properties on either side are shown in green. And the work for this revocable consent is shown in red, which is what you see in the elevation here. So the modification to this revocable consent is to do two things. One was to set back the central portion that's along the stairwell. Let me preface it by saying that the original revocable consent was initiated by the former owner, and it became ready for approval just at about the same week that they were closing on the property. So that we had no say-so in what that consent was, except that we saw the drawings. It was ill-conceived in the sense that it required there's a small fence around that stairwell, about 2.9 inches high, for that to be removed when this other fence was constructed. If that happened, once you walk in past that fence, there's an open well there, which would have been a hazard. So what we're doing is we're bringing that fence back to the property line for the portion that's by the stair. So it's coming out only in front of the entrance to the building and in front of the entrance to the stairwell that goes down to the basement. The basement door is below the one that enters the building from the street. And then the other change is that we're asking for the fence to be equal, or actually it's a median distance in height to coordinate with the adjacent fences. Actually, it coordinates with the street state for the whole block, because every private house on this block has got a tall fence, most of them in excess of 6 feet. We're asking to do a 5-foot 10-inch fence, which is lower than the house on the east and slightly higher than the one on the west, so that it creates a transition between the two. And that's what the modification is for this.
The existing consent was for what the fence was 4 feet, was it 4 feet 6?
Yeah, the other one was 4'6".
We did get a letter of support, right, Craig, on this that Will sent from the Block Association doing.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, there was a letter of support written by the Block Association. If I could share my screen, or you can put up the other drawings, which are which is the actual submittal to the for some reason when I do that, I can't see the screen sharing button. Okay, let's see if I can do this. Oh, okay. I can't do it while you're doing it. Is it possible to put up the other drawings that were submitted? There's a series of photographs there that show both sides of the street and what the streetscape looks like on this block.
You have that, Kevin?
I can try doing it.
I apologize. I didn't organize this meeting, so I don't know which files you're talking about. Can you read me the
Okay,
name
hold
of the
on.
email? Okay, I see.
Something went
One
wrong.
second.
Okay, let me pull up my
Is it this one? Or these are
yes, it's that one. So if you scroll through, there's 6 pages there. You can go to the last 2. These are just details similar to what you've seen. One more. Okay. These are the buildings on 64th Street. This one, if you see my cursor, is the address 177 East 64th. These are the buildings on either side. And you'll see that they all have fences in excess of 6 feet, save for 1 or 2. On the opposite side of the street, if you scroll up one more drawing. Okay. This is a view of the street. The 2 top larger photos, a view of the street from either side. You can see that the fences are consistent. And then this is the opposite side of the street. And the sizes of the fences there, some of them are well over 6 feet.
Good. Anything else?
Sorry?
Do you have anything else you'd like to? Is
No, that's it. So it's pretty straightforward.
there anybody from the public that wants to comment on this application? I don't know if we have anybody from the public here. I don't see anyone. So why don't we ask Michelle Birnbaum? I know you were here last time.
Thanks, Chuck. So let me understand, what is the difference? I'm familiar with this because you presented last time. You had less information. In this presentation, you seem to be lacking the additional information that we asked for last time, which was the aesthetics of the fence. Maybe you have a slide of that, but let me ask you this. You have a property with a stairwell that goes down to that's your main entrance, correct?
well, there are 3 or 4 steps down to the main entrance.
Yes,
The
that's
stairwell, the stairwell goes down to the cellar entrance.
okay. But what you showed us on the slide was your main entrance, correct? The 3 steps down and your front door.
That's correct.
And then as we look at it on the right for us on the screen, we see like a little sort of semicircle barrier with fencing on top of that, correct?
Okay, that is the stairwell going down, yeah.
Right. And you are proposing to keep that, correct?
No, we're proposing to keep the fence.
That's what I'm
At the-
asking. The fence on that little circular element, you're proposing to keep that.
No,
Oh, you're not. So that's a change from last time, correct? That's what I'm trying to understand.
no, it was the same. If we could pull up the drawing. The first drawing that we looked at had the previously granted modification, and it also had what's there today, what's existing, which was before the modification. The modification was never done initially.
I understand, but what is the change from when you presented to us last time? That's what I'm asking you. You're here a second time. What are the changes that you're talking about? Did you reduce
there was some question last time about the original revocable consent. So I prepared another drawing that shows the 2 of them next to each other, the old consent and the modification that we're requesting. The aesthetics of the fence is shown on those drawings.
But what is in other words, last time when you were here, you proposed this fence that was 5 foot 10 inches, and it was coming out a certain amount, a certain distance from the property line. Has anything about that changed in today's presentation? Is it still?
That has not changed, except to reinforce that the distance from the property line has already been established by the original revocable consent.
But what changed from last time? Last time, how many feet from the property line was the fence that you were proposing? Now it's about a foot, it's 1.2 inches and a half, correct? 1 foot.
Correct.
2?
And that has not changed.
And so that hasn't changed. Has the height of the fence changed?
The height of the fence has not changed.
So I believe if we voted on it last time, I don't recall if we actually had a disapproval or we just asked you to withdraw it, right? And come back. Isn't that what we did?
Yeah, I don't believe you voted on it last time.
Right. So we asked you to withdraw it and come back with additional explanation. So for me, and maybe I'm not understanding and others are, and if anybody else has more clarity, I'd appreciate hearing it. But for me, the fence is still 1 foot 2.5 inches from the property line. The fence is still 5 feet 10 inches. The fence is still black wrought iron. The fence is still traversing the width of the property, which is, I don't recall the number of feet. We see it on the drawing. And that has not changed. And that has not changed either.
No.
So, okay. So my question is, if you came back with the same presentation, I'm not sure I understand what's different this week. That's all I'm trying to.
Yeah, there is no difference in the project. The only difference is there was some question last time about the original previously approved revocable consent.
So what was that question that you're answering now?
I'm showing the difference between the two. Last time we did not have the information on the original revocable consent. We didn't have those drawings.
Yeah, that was, Michelle, as I remember it, that was the issue. No one was sure what the original revocable consent showed. And that's what he's come back with.
So we can we just put that picture up with the original revocable
Yeah.
consent and what he's proposing?
Put the two of them up, and I think the point he's trying to make, and maybe Sebastian will make it, because you have your hand up. I think the point he's trying to make is that basically the fence is a little higher, but it's the same. It's essentially the same as what the previously approved revocable consent was. It's not out any further. It's the same. It's just a little bit higher. It was, and that's
So the original was 1 foot 2.5 inches from the property line as well?
correct. Correct.
Okay, if we can get that picture, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, why don't you, maybe if somebody can, Kevin, if you could put that picture up, I think it was the number 5 or 6 drawing in there. I don't remember which one it was, or maybe it was earlier.
Are folks having trouble sharing their screen? That option should be available. But I'll put that up. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
What page did you say?
Go back. It's not, go back.
Oh, the other one.
Earlier ones, you know, where it showed the original revocable consent and what he's asking for now. It was one of the early slides, I think. Yes, there it is.
There you go.
You see there, this is the one that was granted in 2017, and it's out the same distance, and the fence was 4 feet 6. It's going to be now 5 feet 10, and but that's it, Michelle. It's going to be, but it doesn't go out. It doesn't go out any further than
it did. And the
Correct.
aesthetics, I know, Mr. Konachia, you said that the aesthetics are represented in that picture by those little, in other words, the way the design is. You don't have an actual picture of the design of the fence, but I believe last time you claimed that the aesthetics were going to be as per the illustration that we're looking at here.
That's correct.
Okay.
The fences on either side of this property that is shown on that drawing is an actual depiction or drawing of what those fences look like.
Okay.
The one that we're proposing is more in keeping with the architecture of the house, in that this is a townhouse that's been modernized. It doesn't have the original characteristics, so the fence is more contemporary than one would be in a more traditional brownstone.
And you have additional fencing behind this. That's what I was asking about on that little curved element. There's other fencing there. Is that correct? Is that remaining?
No, there is another fencing there. What this fence, if you look at the plan, the difference between how the fence comes away from the property line is, in the original one, it was one continuous fence, 1 foot 2.5 inches away from the property line. What we've done here is we've taken the center section and brought it back to the property line, so it only comes out 1 foot 2 inches in front of the front door and in front of the stairwell entrance to the basement.
and the part shown black is recent. Is that right? The part shown
By doing that, we eliminate the open well for someone who was behind that fence that someone could fall into. It's for safety reasons.
Okay. Why don't we go to Sebastian? No, he's had his hand up for a while. Can we unmute? Go ahead, Sebastian.
Thank you. Hi, Mr. Carnacci. Thank you so much for coming back to us. Really appreciate you taking the time to clarify these. I'd say that this illustration with the 3 side by side makes it really easy to understand. So thank you for that. I'd say I don't love the way that we're taking some of the public street and fencing that in. But I do understand here how it's bringing it in line with the rest of the properties on the street. And I think we should vote in favor of this and allow these homeowners to have the safety of their property and keeping in with the rest of the street. And I know we've also got a lot of different topics on our agenda this evening, so I'd be in favor of coming to a vote on this as soon as we can. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you, Sebastian. Rita, can we unmute Rita? Go ahead,
I
Rita.
100%. It's sad that we have to fence in properties, but this is, we're at a point in our lives where we fence in toothpaste, in Target. So it's just a sign of the times. I think you did a good job. I have walked to see some of the brownstones on the side streets here that do have that staircase down. In many cases, that vault is occupied as an apartment, so therefore it has its own fence. And then there's another fence for the outside. I think that we should approve this as presented.
Someone
Thank
want to comment on this here at this point? Does someone want to make a motion? We need a motion here. Yes, Sebastian? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I move that we vote in favor of this revocable consent.
Is there a second to that? Okay, and I see a couple of seconds, Paul. Okay. Are we ready to vote here? I think we are. Okay.
Let me just read the roll.
Read the roll, yeah.
All right, so right now we have myself, Chuck, Ed, John McClement, Judy, Lori, Michelle, Paul, Rita, Sebastian, TJ, Valerie.
Anybody? Did we get everybody?
They,
Okay. So if you're in favor of approving this, you don't have to do anything. All those who would like to vote no or abstain or not voting for cause can raise your hand. Valerie?
I'm a no.
Go ahead. Okay. Valerie, no. Anyone else? Michelle?
I'm an abstain.
Okay, an abstention. Anyone else? Okay. I think we're, thank you, Stranacchia. I hope you make your flight in time.
Thank you very much. And thank you for getting me on first. I appreciate it.
That's okay. Okay. Next, we have a presentation here, right? Craig?
yes,
Metropolitan Transportation.
yes. You were cutting out.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. So
Why don't you announce it?
yeah, so this is a presentation by the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council regarding Plan 2055, which is the federally mandated long-range transportation plan for the region. So I believe we have Jerry Bogaz and Rosanna that are there. If you could just raise your hand so Kevin can unmute you. And I'd just like to say from a personal standpoint, in my professional career, in my professional life, I spend a large chunk of my time in meetings and working alongside the staff of the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. I am one of the voting members who represents the Westchester County Executive, and I can honestly say that NMTIC is probably the most important transportation agency that barely anyone has ever heard of, and I'm very excited that they are going to be able to present tonight as they are making their way around community boards to present on the long-range transportation planning process.
Why don't you go ahead, however you want to structure it.
Hi, everyone. This is Rosanna Weidekamp at the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a presentation that I'd like to share, and I can do that right now if that works. Let's see. Where are we? Sorry. Sorry, I'm having a little difficulty.
Have you found the share screen icon at the bottom?
Yeah, no, I see that, and I don't know why it's not coming up.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the option to share screen, and then I'm going to turn it back on again to see if that works. So I'm turning it off now. It's on again, so try one more time.
Okay.
There, seems to be working.
There we go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Let me just go back to the beginning. There we go. Okay. Sorry, just one second. Okay. So thank you again. It's a pleasure for me to be here. My name is Rosanna Weidekamp. I'm the Public Information Officer for the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, or as we all know it, NMTEC. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to introduce you to our awesome agency. As Craig mentioned, I also have NMTEC's Assistant Director, Jerry Bogaz, here, who will add some depth to the conversation should you have questions about our regional transportation plan. So without further ado, let me get started. Now, how did you travel today? The potential answers to this seems to increase every year with the growing prevalence of e-bikes, e-scooters, and other forms of micromobility in our world today. But regardless of how you traveled, if you traveled in New York City, Long Island, or the Lower Hudson Valley, you are part of the most vibrant, interconnected transportation network in the United States. I'm going to go through a couple of slides that talks about the who's, what's, and whys of NMTEC and start actually with the what. What is NMTEC? In short, it's the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for New York City, Long Island, and the Lower Hudson Valley. An MPO is a federally mandated and a federally funded transportation policy making organization made up of local governments and government transportation authorities. Those groups form a council and serve as a collaborative forum to address transportation needs in its planning area. It also facilitates informed decision-making and incorporates all of their collective planning activities and works to capture the maximum amount of federal dollars so that it can see projects to fruition in its transportation plan. Now, who is NMTEC? NMTEC is made up of 9 voting members, which include Westchester, Putnam, and Rockland counties in the Lower Hudson Valley, Nassau and Suffolk counties on Long Island, and the Department of City Planning, the New York City Department of Transportation, the New York State Department of Transportation, and the NTA. Those are our 9 voting members. We also have 7 advisory members. They include the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the New Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, the Port Authority, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Now, why is NMTEC? Why does it exist? The short answer is the federal government. As I mentioned earlier, NIMTEC is a federally mandated metropolitan planning organization. In fact, every urban area with more than 50,000 people is required to establish a metropolitan planning organization so that it can go through the federal government's required planning process and that it can go through the planning process to receive federal funds. And some of that required process is outlined here on my slides. Among the responsibilities of every MPO, they must carry out a continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive performance-based multimodal transportation process, and formulate a transportation plan with no less than a 20-year planning horizon. It must also include long and short-range transportation strategies and update the transportation plan at least every 4 years in air quality, non-attainment, and maintenance areas. Do I have any questions so far?
We're gonna hold questions until the end if that's okay.
You may
Okay,
want
that's
to,
great.
you may want to say, Rosanna, that non-attainment is where areas that don't attain the Clean Air Act standards for certain pollutants, like ozone and carbon monoxide, etc.
Yes. Okay. This slide basically provides a quick view of what I just mentioned, the 4 major responsibilities that must be carried out by every metropolitan planning organization in the country. Here we see the cycle of NIMTEC's key actions throughout the metropolitan planning process. Among those actions is our mandate to produce 3 planning products: the Regional Transportation Plan, which defines long-range needs, the Unified Planning Work Program, which basically defines the planning priorities in the 10-county planning area that NIMTEC has, and describes all federally funded activities anticipated within a given year. And the Transportation Improvement Program, otherwise known as the TIP, which defines schedules and funding for projects. There are also 2 planning processes, the Congestion Management Process and the Regional Emissions Analysis, which analyze congestion and air quality impacts. Throughout the regional transportation projects, there are numerous yet strong common threads that run through the actions we perform as a regional council. Because mobility is so crucial to the lives of everyone who works and lives in the NIMTEC planning region, we aspire to these 9 guiding principles. To ensure that everyone can reach transportation in a sustainable, healthy, and equitable manner, to pursue the best use of federal resources, to continue all modes of transportation used by those planning in our planning area, to plan for modal shifts, connections, and accessibility and operability, to support multi-agency approaches to transportation challenges, to collaborate with other government entities throughout our planning area, to engage the public and stakeholder in our regional transportation planning efforts, as we're doing right now, to invest in, collect, and share transportation data, and to be open to innovation in transportation advancements. So here I'm going to start to get into our next regional transportation plan that is currently in development, moving forward 2055, which focuses on these 6 goals: safety and security, infrastructure, resiliency, congestion, land use, and equity and accessibility. Now, because we don't know what to expect in the future, we have to take into account that there are factors that transform and or disrupt our transportation planning. Factors like the pandemic, the evolution of shared mobility, the speed of tech developments in micromobility, for example. We also have to take into account transformative disruptors like climate change, energy transformation, and changing land use patterns. But no matter what these changes are, our vision goals remain the same. They're steadfast and fleshed out throughout these vision statements, which run through the planning and maintenance of the transportation system in our planning area. That includes maximizing safety and security for all users across all modes of transportation, maintaining our infrastructure sustainably and environmentally, factoring resiliency into all of our planning, mitigating congestion, and encouraging land use decisions in support of strategic transportation enhancements. And of course, to advance transportation equity for all. Safety and security are of our utmost concern, and we abide by this list of objectives to ensure investments in transportation assets that enhance safety and security, a prioritization of safe streets, intersections, and shared use right-of-ways, to highlight and coordinate safety and security in transportation, to champion driver assist programs and other technologies that contribute to safety, and to prioritize safety for transportation systems in work zones. And a few more here. To improve accessibility for all abilities, as well as continue bettering the first mile, last mile process. To provide more frequent and expanded services that include enhanced mobility for those who need it, and to improve access for everyone, no matter their age, race, income, or ability. NIMTEC goes through a very extensive process to ensure that we are meeting all of these vision goals. It's a lot. And much of it involves interactions and feedbacks from the public through a strategic public outreach program. Some of our most recent action items are listed here, and I'll bring you through some of these efforts very quickly. Our tools and resources started with the creation of a Moving Forward 2055 website, creating branding for it and everything associated with it, and a survey that asked the interested public for their opinions on transportation priorities in the region. From there, we took these tools and hit the streets in the fall of 2023, participating in pop-up events throughout the 10-county region. We went to festivals, street fairs, fishing events, major transportation hubs, and more, with tents, giveaways, raffles, and iPads that asked people to fill out surveys that allowed them to express their opinion on transportation projects in their region. This is a very small example of the responses we received on various transportation issues like safety and security, environmental justice, resiliency, reducing congestion, and more. The highlighted areas show which item received the strongest response for each of these different locations outlined here. To add more public opinion to our research, we held a series of virtual focus groups in late December of 2023 to get people's opinions on transportation and environmental justice issues, as well as coordinated human services. These virtual workshops were created with audiences representing the residents in the NIMTEC region throughout New York City, Long Island, and the Lower Hudson Valley. Adding to our research was a series of topical forums that were moderated by transportation experts in the areas of alternative energy, freight, micromobility, transportation technologies, and more. These forums were held from March through June of 2024 and encompassed seven different topics, which you see some of them here. Our moderators discussed the latest developments in each of these areas while polling attendees on different topics. And you could see the result of our real-time polling system here. Through this, we asked their preferences for transportation infrastructure investments and more in real time. So what are our anticipated outcomes for all of this research? By this point, we've collected a lot of data from the public and have, in the meantime, been conducting many studies that forecast the transportation needs of our area. For instance, we do a socioeconomic and demographic forecast reports that makes predictions on the population growth and job creation that is forecasted in our area. That study, along with the many others we do, contribute to the transportation planning process. Our next regional transportation plan moving forward 2055 is going to recommend numerous projects, programs, and studies to improve the movement of people and goods during the planning period. And these actions fall into two different categories. One that are programmed projects and ones that are aspirational projects that we label as vision elements. So now I'm going to get into the programmed and vision projects in the Regional Transportation Program for Community Board 8. This is a map of some of those projects. Actually, there are 3, not 4, because this waterfront project only goes up to 54th Street. So this was incorrectly labeled. My apologies. So there are actually 3, and 2 of these, as you will see, were the work that was postponed on the 2nd Avenue subway. My next slide gets into this phase 2 of this project a little bit more and the cost involved. This slide here gets into the 3rd and 4th phase of the 2nd Avenue subway and its cost. Additionally, there is a project around a system-wide signal modernization effort that includes multiple areas in Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan, and includes parts of Community Board 8. Now I'm going to get into some of the transportation research that is scheduled in the Regional Transportation Plan. And there are 4 such studies going on. The York Avenue study will identify strategies to manage roadway capacity and mitigate congestion and vehicle emissions. The East River Bridges Capital Program development will research a 30-year capital construction program for 4 bridges, including the Ed Koch Queensboro Bridge. The Long Island Railroad Origin and Destination Survey will collect customer information on ridership patterns, which include Community Board 8, and the New York City Transit Phase 2 subway capacity study will examine constraints along the G line as well as the B, D, F, and M lines. By the way, there is more information about each of these different research projects on our website at nimtech.org. In fact, everything I've just spoken about is on our website at nimtech.org. And now I'm up to questions.
Well, let's thank you. Let's see if we have members of the public that want to speak first. And I see a couple of hands, I guess. Is Leah? Who's, can you unmute Leah?
Yes, hi, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That was really interesting. I'm not really familiar with your organization. I'm sorry if I missed it, but how long have you been in existence? And you're not the same as like the Regional Planning Association. Do you have some relationship with them? Just trying to understand who you are as a group.
We became NIMTEC, I believe, in the early 1980s. Is that correct, Jerry?
That's correct, 1982.
And you're not the same as the Regional Planning Association?
No.
You're a government group as opposed to a private nonprofit?
That's correct. RPA isn't comprised of any, as you said, it's a private nonprofit. It's not a government agency. NIMTEC and MPOs like it are mandated by the government, are councils of governancies. And we do have a relationship, by the way, with RPA and have worked with them over time on various studies and issues.
Well, I don't know how you failed to be on my radar. Thank you. It's very interesting.
Thank you, Leah. Erica Bercy. Morning, Erica.
Thank you. Actually, I want to echo what Leah said. I've never heard of your organization either, and I'm pretty involved with the community. But can you go back to a couple of the slides, to the budget slides specifically?
Okay, just one second.
Are those zeros correct? Are you talking about 3 trillion?
No, that's billion.
It's billion.
3 billion. 3 billion. Sorry.
Well, generally the subway costs are in the billions.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
Thank you, Erica. Kevin Guzman, I believe, also had. Can we?
Hi, can you hear me?
Kevin, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi. Okay, sorry, I was on delay. Right, so one of the core values that you mentioned was to attain equitable access to transportation. You know, I push my grandma in a wheelchair. I have a 1-year-old daughter that I push strollers on. Equitable to me means more access to accessible stations, think elevators and ramps. So my question is, how are you working with the MTA on this to try to make it more accessible to more people on wheels? And how has the suspension, if any, of congestion pricing affected this?
So, Rosanna, I can take a shot at that if you'd like.
Thank you.
So, you know, one of the key roles we play, and it's not only with the MTA, it's with, there are actually 5 suburban bus operators in our region, as well as the MTA providing service, transit service, is to make the federal money available so that those operators and the MTA can have the resources to both make stations more accessible or expand the number of accessible stations, and also to purchase rolling stock and equipment that's accessible. So over time, the process that comes through NIMTIC has been able to garner those federal resources. The MTA has its own accessibility plan, which you're probably aware of, which over time identifies the stations that will be made accessible. And that plan has been judged acceptable by the US DOT, but it's taken a long time to get to the point we are now, and they're not at a point where everything is accessible. It's an issue of resources and time, and our role basically is to make sure that our member agencies can get the resources that they need to pursue these plans for accessibility.
Kevin, just so you know, there's a consent decree that's been entered to provide accessibility to all the subway stations. And we're in the midst or just starting a project at the East 6th Street station in our district to where there is already an elevator that on the downtown side that goes to the local but not the express tracks, and the project is going to build an elevator to the express tracks, plus putting elevators on the uptown side that will go to both of those tracks. And the funding is secured for that, and they came before our committee not too long ago, and they basically said those projects are going to be going forward. But there are a lot of other projects in there that could be effective.
Sure. Well, yeah, in terms of congestion pricing, it's not completely clear the impact on the MTA's capital program. They're working on that right now. But I can tell you that the accessible stations plan was not dependent per se on congestion pricing. So depending on how that all washes out and how long the pause lasts, it's hard to say exactly what the impact is going to be, but they are under, a lot of pressure to continue to make stations accessible, and for good reason.
Yeah.
Got it. So it's not directly intertwined with the money from the congestion pricing.
I think the congestion pricing, if you want to think of something that was beyond the system enhancement like the Second Avenue subway, replacing the signal system was a big connection to the congestion pricing. But the accessible stations plan wasn't specifically connected to the congestion pricing resources.
Right. Signal reliability, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions from the public? I don't see anyone. Do you see anyone at all, Craig, before we go to the board?
No, just board members.
Okay. So, Lori, I think you had your hand up first, Lori Boris.
Yes, thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Rosanna. That was a fabulous and very crystal clear presentation. So thank you for doing it. My question is following up on what the last speaker from the public said about the accessibility. If it's true that the accessibility projects are not going to be affected by the drop, the elimination, whatever, the pause in congestion pricing, and I'm not sure that is actually correct, but I'll take your word for it. What is, like, in terms of the Second Avenue subway? The Second Avenue subway, from what I understand, is going to be affected by that. Can you tell me a little bit about what the things that are going to impact things in CB8 because of the disruption in the congestion pricing?
Sure. Well, let me just say one thing about the accessible stations. I didn't say there was going to be no impact. It's hard to tell. There may be an impact, but they're not going to. In other words, the accessible stations plan was not dependent on congestion pricing. But there'll be a ripple effect in the MTA's capital program, obviously, and it's not clear right now exactly what all those impacts are going to be. So there could be some impacts on the accessible stations plan, but it wasn't dependent on congestion pricing.
Well, but
Lori,
I mean, okay.
I'm going to send you a link to all of the station accessibility projects that the MTA has scheduled for their website, which it was updated recently.
After it was
put it in the chat as soon as I can.
Okay,
talk
thank you.
between my
Thank you.
screens.
If I could just provide a little clarity, and I was going to be talking about this as part of our next agenda item. There are 23 stations that at the last MTA board meeting were announced to be part of the deferrals of projects that are right now considered to be unfunded under the current 2020 to 2024 capital plan. So there are 23 stations within the New York City subway system and a few suburban stations as well that are now, as they're calling it, resequenced. And two of those are actually the two stations at 59th and Lexington, the 456 station and the NRW station.
So meaning, excuse me, meaning that they'll be delayed, right?
Right. They are now essentially unfunded and being deferred under the current status. And I'll get into that in the next item.
Yeah. Okay. Just because what I am led to understand is that the plan is still in place. You know, like the MTA can say, well, first we're going to do this one, then we're going to do that one, then we're going to do the other one, but the money is not there. So the money's not going to be there until, you know, congestion gets going again. But anyway, okay, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next, can we unmute Valerie Mason, our board chair?
Thanks. Thank you for the presentation. I had met members of your council, but never quite understood what it was. So let me ask you a couple of questions. It sounds to me like you're more like a facilitator or a finder of money from the federal government to help facilitate these regional plans, because, and there's a little bit of editorial that you're going to hear, the state and localities really don't have the funds on their own to take on these major infrastructure projects. So can you just maybe for the little bit more compact what you do?
Yeah,
let me go ahead. Sorry.
Let me clarify what you just said. Yes, we are a facilitator and we are many more things. We are a forum that conducts all types of different research. We conduct research on the socioeconomic and demographic forecasts. We measure the projected growth and jobs that are coming into the area, and if we have the transportation to support it. We measure traffic in the hub, in the congestion pricing zone, which we don't call the congestion pricing zone because we have different parameters around that. But anyway,
that's interesting.
It's somewhat similar. But anyway, we do research, we seek out federal funding, we put together transportation plans, we conduct public outreach efforts in order to get their feedback. We do all sorts of different things. So we're juggling many balls at the same time with one, purpose to
so then who funds all of these research studies that you have going on right now?
Let me just jump in here and say one thing. We're not a nonprofit, okay? We are mandated to exist, and we're not the council. The council is the members. So if there's not a regional council that comes together that does this planning and adopts these products and follows through on the projects, there is no federal funding in our region. So you can say that it's a facilitation, and the staff very much does that. But there's a very formal process here that's mandated by federal regulations.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. So I guess what I'm saying to you is in the context of, let's just say, the Second Avenue subway.
Right.
And I think you had one of the slides up there showing how much money is going to come from the federal government for that project.
Right.
And so basically, I apologize, I don't mean to simplify or denigrate what you guys do, but you've got to give the recommendation, or your key supporter or sponsor to any application that would be made by any of the authorities for that kind of funding from the federal government.
Let me turn that around a little bit. Okay. We're not supporting per se, but the key thing is that all the agencies in the region have to agree to and follow the process to develop any of the major investments, and Second Avenue subway being one of about a dozen, or a little bit more actually. So there has to be agreement. We have to bring the members together to come to agreement. The federal government is looking for that regional agreement and that regional plan to show, what's coming next, what's the priority, how's the funding going to be used into the future. So,
Yeah. So you've got the plan then for 2055 for the entire region, and that's set to 2055.
no, that's what we're developing right now. We have a current plan that goes to 2050, and we're developing the next one. Unfortunately, we have to do this every 4 years. So,
Okay,
unfortunately.
so over every 5 years, you extend the plan out another 5 years.
Yeah, approximately, yeah.
Okay, so then what you're saying is that there are capital projects that maybe get started or planned for, but sort of get pushed, if you will, to another budget, but they're still in the capital plan for the region, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's not unusual, is what I'm saying.
Not at all. And of
Okay.
course, all of our member agencies have their own capital programs, but if they want to use federal dollars, they have to come to the regional table and make sure that everything gets done to get their project in the queue, so to speak.
Right. So, I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but to the extent that and I know I'm kind of mixing topics, and I apologize, Craig. If there's sort of a pause in the capital plan for whatever reason, be it from congestion pricing or some lag time, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary entirely for projects from one capital budget plan to have to move into the next plan to be continued. So,
Yeah.
so that's not something that is like an issue of first impression, and we've never seen it before. So,
No, I've
okay.
seen it a lot.
and yes, certainly. I mean, and I just want to go back to this accessibility question, because actually this became real to me when the construction of the Second Avenue subway was basically entirely within CB8. And we had a lot of hearings about accessibility in the Second Avenue subway, our portion of the project. And it was so enlightening and depressing at the same time to hear disability advocates from all over the city talk about how inaccessible New York City subways were. And that's when I became aware of the ongoing litigation. Okay. I mean, I had my own personal incidents with inaccessibility of the subway. But I mean, of the ongoing litigation and the consent decree that Chuck is referring to. For almost 40 years, the MTA fought against having to put these improvements in place. And there are over 400, correct me if I go astray here, over 472 subway stations and Long Island Railroad stations, 472, and less than 40% of them as of today are accessible within the ADA meaning of that word, which this consent decree that was ordered in the litigation, or that they agreed to, is basically just been entered into like in April of 2023, and that had nothing to do with congestion pricing. And the plan is to only get to accessibility by 2055. So they're doing very few stations at a time. And as I understand it, I don't think this has changed, is basically one elevator. I know when we were doing the Second Avenue subway, we were like, why can't we put 2 elevators in? And they were like, well, and the MTA said this, well, we're only required to put 1. And we were lucky enough at 72nd Street that because of the way of the design of the station, we actually got 5 high-speed elevators as opposed to the 1 that we were going to get if the original plan was going through. But I just want to say, I think that, the work that you do is really important. I would just like to understand, though, so the research money for these studies that you're doing, those all come from the federal government? Because you look like you have like a York Avenue study that's going on. I mean, I'm very interested in that because we have a lot of traffic problems there on the entrance to the FDR Drive, and which will become even more important if the pause is unpaused and everybody is flooding the FDR Drive. So I was wondering where you are in that study and how much money you're spending on that. And when do you think it'll be done?
That is a study being conducted by the city DOT, and you would have to reach out to them about that. That is not a study we're doing, but a study that's been put into our UPWP. And I can send you a link to that, and you can get more information from that as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming tonight.
Okay, a few more questions and then we'll move on to Erica. Person wanted to add some question again.
Yeah, so just to follow on from Valerie's comments, if you discount like the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, the subway system in New York City, 37 years after the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, is about 25% accessible. And on any given day, that's probably half that because of elevators being out, escalators being out. And last August at a New York City Council meeting that I testified at, where the MTA board was included, that because I testified opposing the way congestion pricing was being implemented, they had the nerve to say to the council and the public that the subway system would be fully accessible, to Valerie's point, by 2055. And part of that is, so I lived overseas in Europe where transportation is stellar. Not only do they have pensions, not only do they get paid well, but they time and time again, projects in London and Paris and Tokyo and come in on budget, on time, for a fraction of the cost. And these people are paid living wages. So when I hear about an organization like yourselves that is for profit, I'm really
they're not for profit.
They're not for profit.
They're government.
Okay. So when I hear of yet another government agency that I've never heard of before that has a seat at the table, it reinforces the fact for me that there's just too many people involved in getting all of this stuff done. And this is how we end up with 3 subway stations costing between $3 and $7 billion and not having accessible stations throughout the system instead. I mean, it's the very definition of banging your head against a wall and expecting a different outcome.
Well, I would just offer something about some part of what you said, and certainly Rosanna and I can't speak to MTA's policies on how it's making its system accessible. You know, it has to conform with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
But it doesn't. It fights it.
Hold on. Let me finish. But you know, getting away from their policy for just a second, we're not an additional agency. We're a coordinating body that brings agencies together. Okay. And that's what's required in the metropolitan region to bring in federal dollars, because the federal government does not, except when Congress earmarks projects, the federal government does not prescribe how its money is to be used. Basically says money's available. It'll be apportioned to your region. You get together in a council and, you know, do the planning and decide how you're going to use the money. And if you do everything that we lay out in terms of if you check all the boxes in terms of how the planning is done, we will reimburse your costs. That's how the federal system works in our country. And it's very different in Europe, frankly, because there are central governments in Europe that directly fund projects. It's a different animal here because we have a federal system. But I just would point that out, that NIMTIC is not an agency in that sense. We as the staff work for the council to get through this planning process. Okay.
What council?
the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, which is the name
They
of our,
decide on the priority projects. I mean,
right.
there has to be a
So
way to
The
have priority
nine,
projects.
yeah, with the 9-member agencies that have to come to unanimous agreement when we are voting on anything. And all the documents that were mentioned, the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, the Unified Planning Work Program, ultimately that is a collaborative effort where each agency develops its own projects. Sometimes we have to essentially negotiate how things play out in order to make sure everything falls within federal funding envelopes. Everything is fiscally constrained, and ultimately we will all come to a consensus to endorse these projects. And
Craig, is that open to the public? Do
yes,
public get to
absolutely.
comment?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I've just never heard of your group
Well, you know,
before.
we're in a region with a lot of gargantuan agencies and organizations. So it's very difficult. When you think of transportation in New York City, what do you think of? The MTA? You think of the city itself?
Unfortunately.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, it is what it is. But that's, if you go up into the Hudson Valley, you think about New York State DOT. If you go out to Long Island, it's something else. So, you know, it's not so much our visibility. I mean, that's important to some extent. It's people understanding the process by which federal money comes in, which is why we do sessions like this with community boards and
No,
local
it's very
municipalities and
eye-opening.
suburbs. Yeah,
Well,
Thank you.
sure.
let me just say something more here. We have something in this country that other countries don't have, and in the same way. And it's called the Congress of the United States, and they lay out specific ways that you fund projects. And transportation in urban areas has never been a priority. If you go to any other European country, particularly Western European, and even some Eastern European countries, they put a great premium on rail service, subway service, all kinds of those mass transit. We do not. And we have something here called the automobile, and the automobile basically.
I'm aware of all of this stuff and how it works.
Yeah, but
Thanks.
New York City has the biggest transportation system in the country and one of the biggest in the world. And the problem is money. And that's been the problem. And they're now, I think the MTA is now serious about trying to do something on improving accessibility. And I think they will. If there's continuous funding that's made available.
The only thing the MTA is ever serious about is spending, and not having anything to show for it.
I don't want to get into discussion. It's not, we don't have to do it now. But
yeah, and if I could just make one point about the process quickly. So the York Avenue transportation study or traffic study. So that is a project that this committee and this board in particular have been advocating for probably a decade or more at this point. Even before I was on the board, that was being discussed. And the issue was that there was always a lack of funding and lack of will for New York City DOT to be able to do it. And I'd like to think that our committee and our board played a major role in communicating to New York City DOT that this was a real priority for our district. And New York City DOT, as they were working on their portion of the Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP, which is largely funded by federal transportation funds, so it's a formula-based program. They added that into the Unified Planning Work Program as a project that they were going to use federal funding to help support. So that is, I think, the nexus between what we do here at the community board and what the agencies then do working with us, and then how it flows through the transportation planning process. And ultimately it has to go through the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council to get incorporated into the final regional unified planning work program. And that's exactly how we're going to now see a York Avenue traffic study come to fruition.
And things like that are a major challenge for us because what do you have, 54 community boards in New York City? There are 175 suburban municipalities in our region. It's a huge challenge to communicate like we are with you on a one-to-one basis, and often we do that based on issues and study areas and so forth. But that is a huge challenge for us to get the word out about this overarching regional process when you're focused on what's happening locally, and that's important too.
Okay, we should probably bring this to a close in a few minutes. Let's see, Andrew Fine hasn't spoken, so why don't we let him speak? Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you, Chuck. I think my question was largely addressed, but I'm still wondering exactly who this organization is and why we're talking to them exhaustively about a plan that the MTA agreed to for 31 years from now in terms of accessibility. Just wondering why we're prioritizing this. And honestly, I'd really like to know, can somebody explain this group that I've never heard of? And just in a synopsis, please.
You came late to that. They spent time explaining it, but I don't know, Jerry, if you want to take just a couple of, a minute or so to explain what you do. I think you did that recently, but why don't you go ahead?
Would be happy to follow up one-on-one if you'd like, Mr. Fine.
Yeah, maybe that's better because we've gone through this now. It's it's been a while. And why don't you send them your or something or if you want, we can send you some information about it.
Chuck, I've put a couple of links in the chat, and one of them is to have your email address added to our distribution list so that people can attend our meetings and receive more information about upcoming public outreach events that you can get involved in.
Helping in prioritizing federal projects for funding. That's really what it is. Projects for federal funding, I should say. That's essentially what they do. They coordinate among a lot of federal, local, and state agencies. Okay. Kevin, did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to say that is absolutely the case. Essentially, any project that is going to receive federal funding, it has to go through this process. Any transportation project.
Yeah, under federal law. Go ahead.
Under federal law, yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin. Kevin Guzman, do you want to say anything? You want to say something?
I had a question, but Craig beautifully just summarized it in like 2 seconds, because I was just going to say, exactly what is your role, because I was here from the beginning, and maybe I just don't know enough to know exactly about all entities related to transportation, but that's all. So just one small thing. You said earlier you were not a nonprofit.
They're
We're federally
government.
funded.
Okay, perfect. I just missed that part. Thank you very much.
And they actually work. They are technically employees of New York State Department of Transportation.
Okay, and those projects, like you mentioned, have to go through them. Like some projects that have to go through him.
Any federal funded project not only has to be on the transportation improvement program, but it needs to have been included in concept, at least in the long range transportation plan in moving forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
Lori, last comment on this issue.
Okay, I'll be very brief. First, I thank you again, for coming here and educating us. And I just wanted to say 2 things. One is that Valerie, to your point about how the MTA fought the accessibility requirement, every government on earth fought the accessibility requirement. I used to live in Binghamton, and I was a reporter there, and they were fighting making the buses accessible. They were like, we have a transportation system, we have an accessoride, system, and we don't have to do that. So the point is, everybody has to fight it because they can. The other thing I wanted to say is that if you haven't seen this, and this goes to everybody, if you haven't seen the movie Crip Camp, you should stream it, because it shows from a disabled person's point of view what life is like transportation wise. So I highly recommend that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. We thank Rosanna and Jerry for coming here and giving us a presentation and introducing what's a very important coordinating agency, the federal funds. Okay, Craig, you want to introduce the next item?
Thank you for your time, folks.
Thank
Thank you all.
Sure. So moving the agenda to the next item. The next item is discussion of the potential impacts of the pause of congestion pricing on planned MTA capital projects impacting Community District 8 residents. So I'm going to try to just provide a little bit of an overview that, especially for those who this may be somewhat of a reintroduction of sorts, especially because this is a reintroduction of sorts of congestion pricing to this transportation committee. I do want to just provide a little bit of background. And as I think you get the point right now, this is as much about the MTA's capital plan as it is congestion pricing, or perhaps it's the nexus of these two initiatives. So just going back to how we got here. So back in 2019, this committee, we hosted a presentation by the MTA on the Fast Forward plan, which you may remember. It was developed in response to the 2017 Summer of Hell, as it became popularly known, when the New York City subway system breakdowns and buses as well, all those breakdowns and the reliability of the system hit a breaking point, no pun intended. So Fast Forward, as a plan, identified infrastructure projects that were necessary to bring the system back from the brink. And that became the backbone of the 2020 to 2024 capital plan that was issued in October 2019. And as I'll get to in a moment, the capital plan's funding relied heavily on congestion pricing revenues, which is now on pause based on the order by Governor Hochul that was issued on June 5th. So I just want to take a moment to now just provide a little background directly in regards to this. So when congestion pricing was enacted in April 2019 through legislative action, you'll recall it was the New York State budget in which the law was passed as part of. The legislative finding contained two elements, which are now memorialized in Section 1701 of the New York Vehicle and Traffic Law. I'm just going to share my screen so I could just provide a few of the details here. So just bear with me 1 second. Okay. Can you see my screen at this point? It looks like you can. Okay. So there were two different pieces of it. One was the piece regarding capital funding, in which you can see here that one of the bases for congestion pricing had to do with the fact that temporary actions were taken, and this is the legislative finding. Temporary actions had been taken to address the safety of subway, bus, and commuter rail riders in the short term, including an emergency declaration and increased funding, capital funding for the subways in the most recently adopted capital budget. So the legislator then determined that a long-term sustainable solution was necessary in order to ensure stable and reliable funding to repair and revitalize this significantly important mass transit asset. And then the second piece was related to congestion mitigation, and that's, of course, the basis that New York was the second worst city in the U.S. and third in the world in terms of congestion, and it had a significant cost in regards to the New York area economy. So the law then went on to state that in order to ensure a safe and efficient mass transit system within the city of New York and to protect the public health and safety in New York's residents, a program to establish tolls for vehicles entering or remaining in the congestion zone was necessary and a matter of substantial state concern. So then, just to complete this loop, the law then went on to say that for the purposes of establishing this toll, that the MTA board, or Tri-Borough Bridge and Tunnel Authority board, technically, shall ensure annual revenues and fees collected under such a program and provide for sufficient revenues into the capital the Central Business District or Congestion Pricing Capital Lockbox Fund, necessary to fund $15 billion for capital projects for the 2020 to 2024 MTA capital plan, and then any revenues above that would be available for any successor program. So just the The law then makes clear that revenues from congestion pricing were to be used explicitly for capital projects. So as you can see here, this is from section 553J of the New York State Public Authorities Law, which established this capital lockbox fund and can only be used to support the cost of the congestion pricing program and the MTA's capital projects, with 80% dedicated to the New York City transit system and the other 20% to the region's suburban railroads, Long Island Railroad and Metro North. So then just going back to the 2019 capital plan, sorry, give me 1 second, I just lost it. So this is was taken directly from the presentation from the 2020 to 2024 capital plan that the MTA provided in, I believe it was October 2019. So you can see here that the $15 billion from congestion pricing was that largest component. So the pause effectively removed this piece of the funding pie, and as a result, certain federal, and in addition with to the fact that there are certain federal matching funds that were also contingent on this funding being available, the net impact of the congestion pricing pause is about $17 billion. So what does that mean here? So let me just figure out where I want to go with this. So, so really one potential impact to approach to dealing with this impact would be for state elected officials to approve other funding streams to replace congestion pricing. That's not been successful so far. There was some discussion of targeted tax increases that didn't go far, and then the legislative session ended. There's also been some talk about whether there could be changes to the law and perhaps some changes to the tolling policies that maybe that would help change the mind of the governor. But again, the legislature, the session ended and it's not going to meet again unless a special session is called until next year. So the approach that's now being taken involves what the MTA is identifying as reprioritizing and resequencing the 2020 to 24 capital plan so it could fit within the existing funding envelope. So as of June, there was about 27 billion, in projects that have yet to have funding obligated. So that means that that is now down to $12 billion after the pause was instituted. So the MTA strategy has become prioritizing the most critical and timely needs to keep the system running and safe while other projects are being proposed for deferral. So hopefully that just provides the context necessary to see how we got here. So with that in mind, I just want to talk about the projects that are being proposed for deferral. And thus what that means is that they are being removed from this 2020 to 2024 capital plan. And to be clear, that doesn't mean that the projects are being canceled. It means that they are currently unfunded and being delayed. It would give the MTA the ability to add them to the 2025 to 2029 capital plan. But that plan, it would result in these projects still being delayed compared to the current trajectories that they are on. But that 2025 to 2029 plan is also constrained by fiscal realities, and a pause that doesn't get unpaused will have direct impacts to the size of that plan. So in other words, some projects may get excluded from that 2025 to 2029 plan, which some may construe as the projects being effectively canceled. So that, I guess, is going to be, different people may view that in different ways, but the reality is that yes, just going back to some of the discussion that was held before, projects are shifted between capital plans all the time, but the effect of that is that A, they are going to inevitably get delayed as a result of that, and B, there is no guarantee that it gets deferred only one cycle. It could be multiple cycles, or a project could ultimately be canceled in the interim. So that's the background there. So the deferrals that were being proposed as per the MTA include ADA accessibility upgrades at 23 stations, which includes, as I mentioned before, the 59th Street 456 station and the 59th Street Lexington Avenue NRW station. So obviously accessibility has system-wide implications, as we talked about, and these two stations are specifically within our district's boundaries and are some of the busiest stations that are currently lacking accessibility at this time. Then you have signal modernization. So I think this was mentioned in the past presentation as well, but the 6th Avenue line and 63rd Street tunnel, so the F train is one of the lines in which signal modernization is going to be deferred as of now. So of course, signal problems tend to snowball. So just because we're only talking about the F train here doesn't mean that other signal projects aren't going to potentially have impacts as well on riders. Then you have rolling stock. So there's $1.5 billion in rolling stock that is going to be deferred, which includes this replacement of the subway cars on what is known as the A division. Those are also known as the R62A cars. Those are the oldest in the system, and those subway cars are currently in use to some extent on select 6 trains. So those are trains that are among the most, because they're the oldest, they have the highest rates of, or lowest rates of miles between breakdowns, which is one of the core key performance indicators in terms of how system reliability is generally measured. So the deferral of that could have implications for transit users here in our district as well. System expansion. We talked about the 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 2, and while the construction and extension will take place just north of our district, many of our district's residents, and yes, selfishly, I'm including myself, travel north daily to proposed locations where that subway extension would serve, such as the 125th Street corridor and East Harlem. So that is something where there are many residents of this community district that are going to be affected by a delay of that project as well. Zero emission buses. So there are 250 zero emission buses that are now going to be deferred, along with some of the infrastructure improvements to support them. So we've seen zero emission buses in our district, and that's something that I think people have generally responded well to. And then state of good repair, there's $3 billion in state of good repair projects. And that includes 5 station renewals, station component repairs, and backup house projects. So that includes rail yards and shops and depots and employee facilities. And just to make the point, just because a project isn't public facing doesn't mean that it's not a critical need and has impacts as to how the system operates. So that could also affect system reliability. And then upgrades to infrastructure and technology, which includes a number of projects, including public address upgrades at 70 stations. So I don't know for sure whether that includes anything in our district, but it may, based on just the number of stations that are affected there. So that's just an overview of what this pause is potentially going to mean. So again, and one last thing, please just keep in mind that operating and capital budgets are entirely independent from each other. So that means that raising fares or reducing fare evasion and other seemingly low-hanging fruit options to raise revenues won't really have any bearing on capital projects that were going to be supported by the funding from congestion pricing. So that, in essence, is what the impacts are in terms of the transportation network. And just to be clear, the reason why it was really something that that Chuck and I believe we needed to be discussing here tonight is because these are transportation impacts. This is very separate and distinct from the congestion pricing task force, which has been focused more on the impacts of implementing congestion pricing. And we spent a lot of time on that and talking about a lot of the issues that would be related to that. But these are things that we weren't necessarily talking about as part of that task force, because these are more transportation items in terms of just going back to fast forward. So that hopefully just closes the loop on that. So that's I think where the discussion really could be had. So I don't know that we want to take any action today. I just thought it was, given the timeliness of this, given that this is in many ways the biggest transportation story in New York City in many years, it was something that we felt we needed to just be able to have a discussion about, especially because the MTA board will be making perhaps some additional changes as we go forward, and the next capital plan effort is really about to culminate very soon. So I hope everyone found that helpful. I hope that was clear, and I'm happy to take any questions and obviously to have discussion on this.
Let's go to the public. Let's go to the public first on this. People haven't. Liam Jeffries, he hasn't to raise his hand.
Right.
Liam,
Yeah, so thanks for bringing this up for discussion. And also my first response to hearing this news, and also my response now, is that this is just one of the most monstrously undemocratic things that the state government has done at least done in the last few years. Like, we were not even just talking about the capital projects that will be deferred, but also the fact too that this was 5 years of a lot of our lives devoted to public comment, public review of all this. This was a big policy. The MTA wanted to make sure they were going to do this right, and that just got thrown away seemingly on the governor's whim. And the fact that she did so in a way that also screws over the MTA's finances is just an added layer to this. Several projects here I would have directly benefited from. The signal modernization on the 6th Avenue, 63rd Street lines. I use the F train. I use the F train quite frequently. If the signals on that fail, my trip is very much in jeopardy. The elevators at Lexington Avenue and 59th Street were going to be massive improvements. That is a busy station, as Craig mentioned earlier. That is also one of the most labyrinthine stations to use, even for people with full mobility. So having elevators on hand to help navigate that would have been actually really, really good. And just moreover, it's just the fact that all of these projects were going to be certainties of right up until Hochul said that she actually changed her mind, didn't want to do this. And that's just, I just can't get over that. I just really can't get over the fact that this was 5 years for the public review and public process that were just thrown away seemingly on one person's whim. And that's just monstrously undemocratic to me. That's not befitting the process that should take place in New York. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I'm still really pissed off about this, is just the fact that she basically made a mockery of the years of public review that went into this, all because she apparently personally didn't like it. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, we have other members of the public who haven't spoken before. Let me take Corey Barrett. Corey, how are you?
Thank you. A couple of observations, and without getting into the merits of the congestion pricing, I've called it a tax, but I have about 23 years of prior life experience dealing with government budgets. And in fact, the recent state controls report documented that no previous capital plan exceeded around $34 billion. And this one was about 2/3 more than that. And so in all likelihood, a significant piece of this plan would never have actually occurred in the time to begin with. And number two, there was a memo done at the time this was agreed to, a memo of understanding with the state legislature. And many of the projects that are cut were not in that memo as being funded by congestion pricing. So the MTA is playing a little bit of a sleight of hand on what they've chosen to move and not. And that really needs a good look-see. So, I think they've actually moved into the congestion pricing realm projects that were otherwise funded because they matter to people and it would get people's ire up. And I think that's important to note. But again, the reality is that you can't have a plan that you can't really do, even if it's fun, whether it's funded or not. And that was really a misnomer. And I think people need to understand that, forgetting about the merits of whether congestion pricing makes sense or not. And I don't think it makes sense. And I've done a lot of work in that regard to document it. The bottom line is if you're talking about congestion in order to reach the funding requirements of the scheme, you need a sufficient number of passenger cars to continue rolling into the zone. And if you actually do achieve a reduction, you just have to charge them more. And going on the delivery side, you're increasing the cost of goods and services to residents in and out of the zone, whether they use the subway or mass transit, public transit system or not. So I think those are things all that need to be taken into consideration about this. And really, this is probably a good time to look at whether a 4-year plan even makes sense as an approach. And that's something, certainly a learned board, with a lot of professionals like Board 8 probably can help weigh in on in changing how this is done, because this is, in all likelihood, it would not occur in any event. And I think really it was about Cuomo at the time wanting to be the next Robert Moses, and that was a place where he can find money, and he didn't care. And he's not a player in this anymore. So that's my basic comments. And if people want to call my expertise, I'm always available. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Let me take Kiwi Callahan now, as he's spoken before. Unmute Kiwi.
Hello. I haven't spoken before because I'm a new resident of the Upper East Side. I actually moved here from Hell's Kitchen in last fall.
Welcome.
Thank you. I am so happy to be here. And part of the reason I left Hell's Kitchen was because it is unlivable with the traffic that is down there. So I do want to just offer my personal testimony. I am not an expert. But what I can tell you is that I lived on 45th and 11th for 5 years. And that's my Chihuahua. I don't know if you can hear her in the background, but I take her out for a walk 4 times a day. And every morning and every night, the traffic from the tunnel backs up 11th Avenue from the tunnel, oftentimes to 60th. And so on 45th and 11th, you have people who are understandably frustrated trying to get in or out of into the tunnel or across to the West Side Highway, and they're blocking the intersection constantly. So it's like a game of Frogger trying to get across 11th Avenue every day, twice a day. So that's on the personal side. On the other side, I am a small business owner. I run a video production company. And so I often am in a vehicle driving across town with a lot of gear and sometimes some really sweaty, wonderful young men. And it is like driving a commercial van across Manhattan right now is just not doable. So I think I understand where some residents might be skeptical of the idea that maybe by reducing congestion in this way that we might, there might be some other issues raised. But I just think that right now, as someone who was a resident and a business owner in that area, I didn't talk to a single person in that neighborhood who was opposed to congestion pricing, because we are just desperate for a solution. Up here, I don't feel it as much, and that's wonderful. But I was privileged enough to have the option to leave, and most of my neighbors were not. So again, and also I just want to say a quick thank you for giving us that timeline. I have had such a hard time finding that really wonderful, comprehensive timeline in history, and that was just I really appreciate that. So thank you so much, Craig, for doing that. So I'm just going to wrap up and just say I don't know what we can do. I don't know if there's any action that you can take tonight or any other night, but I just want to throw all of my weight and support behind this initiative and just let you know that there are many people like me who think it's important and think it matters and want it to happen. And we're really mad that it didn't. So thank you.
Thank you, Kiwi, and welcome. Hope to see you at other board meetings. Okay, next, Tommy Lowe. You go, Tommy?
Yes, yes, sorry.
You're on.
Okay, thank you. I'm here as a resident of the Lower East Side because I also have been following this issue for 5 years, including attending almost every MTA meeting, all the hearings, reading the environmental assessment from beginning to end. And I think it's important for the people of Community Board 8 to know that the MTA says there are winners and losers in this program. The losers are people of color, low income, who live in environmental justice communities. The EA shows and points out that on the FDR Drive, from 14th Street to the Brooklyn Bridge, which encompasses a huge portion of the Lower East Side, where only a handful of census tracts are not environmental justice issues. That area is populated by NYCHA housing, and the air on the FDR Drive, according to the environmental assessment, will be worse under congestion pricing. They have no mitigation because the legislation only allows mitigation for routes like the BQE, the Cross Bronx, that have truck traffic. The FDR Drive does not have truck traffic, so there is no mitigation proposed for the Lower East Side. So there's a moral compunction portion of this issue. Community Board 3 just recently tabled a resolution proposed by Community Board 5 and several other community boards, which were asking for support for congestion pricing. So I think that Board 8 has to realize you don't live on an island, and your support of congestion pricing will have a negative impact on the residents of the Lower East Side, which has among the highest asthma rates, health issues that will be negatively impacted by this. If you have read the EA, and if you have not, I would suggest you read the environmental justice section of the environmental assessment before you go on and heap this problem on the poorest people of this city. Thank you.
Okay, let me interject here. We've heard from a couple of different people about the pros and cons of the program itself, and that's not what we really want to talk about. We have a congestion pricing task force which looks into all of those issues. We want to really discuss the potential impacts of on the funding and projects here that potentially affect our board. And so we don't want to get off. I'm sure we could have a discussion all evening, which we're not going to do, about the pros and the cons of congestion pricing. And I know a number of the people who are on this Zoom have strong opinions one way or the other, but we don't want to really get into that kind of extended discussion, frankly. So, and I'd probably let it go on, but we've heard from both sides, so I think that's enough. And Andrew, fine, if you're going to want to get into it, I'm not calling on you. So, because I know you. So let's get to other members of the public. Kevin, how about Kevin Guzman? I will call you. I'm not going to ignore you.
How are you? I just want to throw my opinion on one of the comments that congestion pricing will increase the cost of goods. A significant portion of the vehicles are personal vehicles in Manhattan. The truth is that the cost of congestion is a burden on everyone, whether economic or not. But anyhow, what was said earlier, what Craig mentioned, he posted some text that said that the congestion pricing will negatively affect 23 stations for accessibility reasons. 23 stations won't be improved, accessibility won't be improved on them. But earlier, from the other transportation, from the transportation committee, they said that that's not the case, that congestion pricing revenue wasn't directly linked to improving accessibility. So can we clarify which is it?
Well, Craig, you want to, I guess the MTA board mentioned something about the 23 stations at their latest meeting. And so I don't know, Craig, do you want to comment?
Right.
Craig, did you hear him say from the MTC? Did you hear him say that it wasn't directly affecting accessibility?
He talked about, yes, in the beginning he did talk about that.
Yeah.
I think that was the broader plan for New York City, and I think this may stem back, and don't quote me on this, to the settlement in regards to the accessibility filings from many years ago. So the MTA had to develop their plan to become fully accessible, and that was what was mentioned is going to take place over the course of the next 30 years, because it's going to take a lot of time and money and investment in order to get there. So fundamentally, that was not itself, in and of itself, affected by it. What is affected right now is that they have taken out 23 stations from the current 2020 to 2024 capital plan, meaning that they are going to need to be reinserted into a future capital plan. So it is quite possible that they will be added to the next plan, 2025 to 2029. They are not going to be canceling those projects. But because the entire capital plan, this is what the point I was trying to make, was predicated on that $15 billion contribution, they now have to make choices as to how to reduce the capital plan, the current capital plan, by $15 billion. So they only had $12 billion currently available that was uncommitted to be able to use to fund the $27 billion in projects that still didn't have obligated funding in the plan, in the current capital plan. So they had to reduce it by that amount, and in order to get there, they have taken out these 23 stations. Again, it's I would surmise that it's likely that they will add those back to the next plan if accessibility truly is a priority, but it's going to be delayed at a minimum based on the current proposal that they have put out there. If that makes sense.
So just so I understand, so if congestion pricing wasn't halted, then we would have those 23 stations?
If congestion pricing was not paused, I'm just going
Yeah.
to share the screen for a second. So this is the slide that that they used at the MTA board meeting to talk about
Thank you.
yeah, to talk about it. So they are deferring 23 stations. And then they say they are potentially canceling 2 of the Long Island Railroad stations, but those 23 stations, as it says here, it included provisions for downside scenarios, and it was predicated on full funding for the program. So there are some losses of funds that make this inachievable under the current plan. So they made this strategic decision, and I'm not defending it. I'm not trying to interpret why they did it, and I'm just trying to present here what happened, and people can contest whether they had other approaches that would have been more viable, or whether they had funding to do this. That's besides the point. I'm just trying to talk in terms of facts as to where we are now, because that is what they have put out there.
Okay. Yes, because it's, I know I bring it up a lot, it's just because it's a kind of an important issue. I do have a family, young baby pushing strollers. It just feels like the government is telling me if I want to move within the city with my family, I should buy a car and cause even more congestion. So it's ridiculous that this whole thing was paused. I completely support the congestion pricing and improving our subway even better, because that's how we get around in the city. Thank you, though. Thank you.
Okay, let me take a couple. We have some people who haven't spoken before from the public. let's see, Margaret Schwartz.
Hi.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to stick to your, I guess, ground rules of dealing with how living on the Upper East Side, that congestion pricing has been halted and affects these projects. I'm close to 60 years old. I've lived in New York my entire life. I was born in Astoria, where there's an elevated subway train, where just until a few years ago, an elevator was put in there. And so the idea that even getting back to the capital plan of $15 billion committed to accessibility, in a nutshell, I just don't believe the MTA. I just really don't. I mean, I lived in an area where there were no escalators to an elevated line, and there still are no escalators. And whether you can say that people want to fight accessibility because they can, I don't know what to say here. And how it affects me on the Upper East Side for the new person who just moved here, there'll be more cars here because they will not want to cross the line. And all our hospitals here involve people driving in who are on schedules that really aren't conducive to the way that our subway and our bus system run. I do know many nurses, doctors, hospital workers that travel from outer boroughs. As I was a person who traveled in most of my life, I attended Hunter College from Astoria. So I've been riding the subways almost my entire life, as well as the Long Island Railroad. I had a stint of time in Nassau County. And I'm just tired of the money grabs. I'm just tired of it. I'm tired of finding another way to make the MTA do something they should have done before I was even born. I'm talking 60 years. An elevated subway train still doesn't even have an escalator. I'm not even talking. And these things can be done, especially if you know Astoria. It's an end of the line kind of situation. An elevator could have been put in. My father basically had to retire because he couldn't ride the subway system anymore. And when we approached at the time, Peter Vallone Jr., who was our council person, he said no one really cared about putting any kind of accessibility in to our subway station. So that was 20 years ago when we were trying to push him to do it. And here we are. And now we got this $15 billion that we don't know what to do with. And I don't know that much about these ghost plates that are now happening. And the only people that are going to be paying are the people who are honest and crossing the congestion line and paying. And I do drive a car in this city, and I actually pay for a garage. And there are people on this street where I live on 79th Street who park basically for free during alternate street side parking and are never ticketed. Never ticketed. And yes, I've done 311. Yes, I have actually the phone number of my sanitation man to call him to tell him to start ticketing the cars that aren't moving. So that's the route that I've taken. And there are many ways that we can generate money in the city. And I know that's separate from the MTA, but I'm really tired of who's going to pay. The person who's swiping their card, showing their Omni on the bus. And that's still, and I know that you said before, Craig, that that wasn't something you wanted to talk about, but then let's just make it free. Let's just say that we don't have to pay at all if that's not really an element of a revenue stream. And the revenue stream is anybody who's willing and honest enough to pay the fee when they cross 60th Street. And that's the bottom line. And getting back to the who's going to suffer, and there's winners and losers, it will be those cars. And I don't care that they're not trucks, but there are people who need to drive into this city, our doctors, our nurses, our plumbers, our electricians that need to service this area. And yes, that will be put onto everybody in this area. And it's sounding like a NIMBY thing now, and it really isn't that. The reality is the MTA needs to be accountable and they need to show their books. And that's it. Thank you for letting me speak.
Okay. I'd like to I'd like to have everyone try to keep their remarks concise because I promised our board chair, who's been patiently waiting, that we would try to keep the discussion focused and reasonably succinct. So normally I like to let everybody talk, but I think we need to keep it focused here. So let me go to Kirby Kersels, who hasn't spoken yet.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to add one thing about the accessibility consent decree. There's a minimum, you can look up the consent decree, and there's a minimum that the percentage of the capital plan that the MTA has to spend. And so that's where I don't know what the other people were talking about, the NIMACT or whatever people, that's why they're deferring accessibility, because they just have a lot less money, and so less money overall. And then I'd also like to talk about personally in my life, my partner is disabled and uses elevators to access the subway. And so when we travel, because of the New York City subway's abysmal level of accessibility, we oftentimes take the bus. And I wanted to add, along with all the projects that are going to suffer in CB8, I'd also like to add that, without congestion pricing, our buses, which are really, really slow, including, I think the 102 is the slowest bus in the city. Maybe it's not, but it was the slowest bus in the city a couple of years ago. That because, for people that do ride the bus, even if it's not sexy signals or whatever, we are also going to suffer that way. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we have two more public members, then we'll go to the board. Go to take Andrew Fine.
Hi, Chuck. I'm glad you gave me a few minutes, because when you earlier suggested that I should not speak in this forum, it really actually made me almost reach for another beta blocker, to be honest with you. It's infuriating that I can spend over 2 hours on a community call, and like 30 or 40 of those minutes are spent on somebody's fence in front of their millionaire home on East 64th Street. But suddenly we should shut this down very quickly when there's an opposing voice. I find that offensive. That's number one. So going back to my original comment, the plan that we hear and the narrative that we're hearing is like the Grand Prospect Hall commercial. Remember that? We will make all your dreams come true. That is how congestion pricing is being sold, whether it's signals, service, new buses, the Second Avenue subway. By the way, the Second Avenue subway is going to cost at least $7 billion, half of all of congestion pricing. And that's before the inflationary effect that always happens with every MTA project. That's number one. Number two is when they say this is undemocratic, that is completely wrong. What is undemocratic is having a unpopular thing that would never pass an up or down vote in the legislature or by referendum snuck into a 2019 budget. That is undemocratic. The vast majority of our democracy is against this plan because it is unfair, it is regressive, it is anti-disabled, anti-elderly, it's racist, it's classist, it's awful. The bottom line is that the MTA right now has $56 billion in debt. Their debt service, I didn't check today's number, but it's got to be at least $3.5 billion a year. What do they want to do? They want to borrow another $15 billion to be another $1 billion in debt every single year, basically in perpetuity, or at least until the 2055 plan is complete. Ignored in this whole thing is for-hire vehicles. 100,000 for-hire vehicles. They're basically getting a pass where the riders pay a reduced number in order to just gallivant around the zone. 100,000 of them. This is patently wrong. And what happened to the bailout that the MTA got just last year? The payroll mobility tax. Remember that? That was $1 billion a year. Oh, and then the MTA just found $400 million out of thin air in savings. And you have the casino revenues, which are coming up, which are pledged to the MTA, just like everything else. The bottom line is that this is a scam. It's awful for all New Yorkers. It's inflationary. And just when we're all just trying to get by here and costs are going up, 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 the last thing we need is another tax on all of us just for the privilege of exercising our freedom and driving around New York in our vehicles. We're only 45% of New Yorkers, God forbid. But the reality is that we all have a way to get around, and we need our freedom to do just that. Thank you. And thank you for acknowledging my opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Andrew. I gather you're against the program.
You can bet.
Okay.
And I believe he is also one of the leaders of one of the lawsuits. So
whatever, everybody gets a chance to speak. Oh, I see here's someone who hasn't spoken before, and Allie Ryan. Go ahead, Allie. And Erica, I'll get to you, but if you've already spoken a few times, I want to give a chance for people who haven't spoken at all. Go ahead, Allie.
Okay. Thank you. My name's Allie Ryan, and I live in the East Village. I'm actually speaking today because I buy a weekly MTA card. I bicycle, I walk, I take my kids uptown actually into Community Board 8 sometimes for tutoring on a weekly basis. And my husband works in the film and TV industry, so he actually does need a car, and he is an electrician, so he has tools, and he has to go all around the city, basically within 50 miles of Columbus Circle. And I just want to share, I did raise 2 children going on the MTA at a time when strollers were not allowed to be open, that they had to be closed, and it can be done. I've done it. My kids are now 10 and 12 years old. So I just want to say, in regard to the MTA and the funding, I'm like, I am paying my fair share. And with congestion pricing, it's going to make the cost of living in Manhattan go up. I already have to pay. I don't buy ice cream because it's $8.50 a tub. That's outrageous. I go to my parents' house and it's $4.50. So we have to recognize we're all doing our own thing. I see people jumping turnstiles. It doesn't matter what the age is, if it's a man or a woman, what their race is. People are jumping turnstiles. They need to pay. And I resent that we have to pay more when this is a regressive tax on the people who live here. And I also want to say, I live within 2 blocks of East River Park, which was destroyed. If you want to take the FDR, you can see it for yourself. Over almost 1,000 trees that are 80 years old have been cut down. So when you hear that this is going to increase reduce air pollution, it's BS. Save a tree, save an 80-year-old tree, because it takes 80 years for an 80-year-old tree to grow. And you can say like, oh, well, we're planting street trees, but street trees are pencil thin. Like they don't offer the same amount of oxygen and quality of life to our neighborhoods in comparison to 80-year-old trees. So I just want to say, help save parks and mature trees as well. And that will go a long way to improving our environments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Okay. Okay, Erica, I guess Erica Burson is the next member of the public here.
Thank you. So Allie, thanks for that. And I agree with you. And I would say to Liam that actually what Governor Hochul did was listen to the millions of people that actually have been working to oppose this congestion pricing. And I'm not adverse to the MTA raising funds, even though they constantly misspend. And if I did that as a small woman-owned, disabled business owner, I wouldn't have any business. They are accountable to actually accountable to nobody. And to, I forget whose point earlier, but no, I don't trust them. I wouldn't trust them with a pack of gum, managing a pack of gum at this point. $15 billion, to the point earlier, it's going to take three stops on the subway, $7.6 billion. The math has never added up. We have 136 billionaires who have addresses here in Manhattan. If you tax them 0.0001% more, you would pay for everything the MTA needs. You would pay for repaving, you'd pay for buses, you'd pay for new subways. This is a regressive tax on 99% of people who live in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And we're tired of it. The MTA has line items everywhere. They just bury them for the most part so that you can't see where it's coming from. It's going to go from 60th Street to 72nd Street to 79th Street to 86th Street and beyond. And it's going to keep going up and up and up. And on top of that, what nobody points out that supports it is that we had a little thing called a global pandemic between the time it was approved in 2019. A ton has changed. I work in the corporate world. My friends who've worked in Midtown for years, they're not going into those offices. Those offices are 50% empty and are never coming back. Just like the amount of congestion is never coming back. I can get, and I have hundreds of examples, I can get from my apartment on 71st and 2nd to the Lower East Side on any given day of the week, any time of the day, for sometimes half the amount of time it takes on a subway living with MS. And I have to rely on those. And oh, by the way, the people that are opposing this are not backed by special interest groups like TransAlt is and the for-hire vehicles. I use them. I need them because I can't rely on the subways and buses, especially when it's 100 degrees outside. But let's be real. Groups like TransAlt are completely disingenuous because if you look at their 990 online, they're getting money from all of these lobbying groups. So when people say that Hochul, did a last minute end run, actually what she finally did and what our government in DC did when they told her that this was not playing well, she actually, unlike my electeds and Nadler and Kruger and Mark Levine, she actually listened to the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that oppose it. And to the person who moved from Hell's Kitchen to the Upper East Side, we were 100% right. We are going to get slammed up here with people driving around looking for parking because they don't want to cross the zone. So you're going to be looking out your window and walking your little dog to the same kind of traffic if this goes forward. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you. Okay. I'm not going to take anybody who already spoken before from the public. Sorry, Lee and Corey. Because we're going to go to the board now and let's try to finish this up. Michelle?
Yeah. First of all, let me say the Siena poll showed that 66% of people do not want congestion pricing. I have to say, I'm a little bewildered as to why we had this as an agenda item. For this meeting. I'm on the Transportation Committee. I'm on the Congestion Pricing Committee. The agenda item says we're having a discussion of potential impacts of the pause of congestion pricing. However, you only addressed it from the point of the finance and the MTA. The other impact of the pause in congestion pricing are all the benefits that it's going to bring to the people who are living in areas that already have extensive pollution. As a matter of fact, in the revised study that the MTA did, they increased their mitigation budget from like 100 million to 300 million because they themselves recognize that in fact this is going to cause more pollution in various areas. This is going to cause an average person, and it's not for you or us or anybody else to say whether or not somebody needs their car wants their car, uses their car. This is their right, okay? And if they want to use it, it is not for anyone to judge as to whether or not they have need. You can't make a decision that if somebody has to drive in the city because they're carrying equipment, because we had a case I know of a music teacher who has to take her instruments from the Lower East Side to the Bronx, where she teaches music to special needs children. Imposing this on her, and this is a workforce person, will cost $4,000 a year if she did this on a daily basis. That is not tax deductible money. It would be tax deductible money if she were moving within the school day from place to place. You can deduct the transport. If you're using it as going to work, coming from work, this is not tax deductible money. So in essence, it really costs us $6,000 to $8,000. This is not for anybody to say whether or not she should use a car or can use a car, and you're basically punishing workforce people. That's how you're punishing. I am vehemently against this. I was from day one. But this community board early on passed a resolution in favor of congestion pricing. You got your way. It went through. I voted against it. Others voted against it. It went through and you got your way. Now that the governor, and I believe, yes, she listened to the people, and politically, I think she was instructed to listen to the people because there was a big risk here politically for her and for others. She put a pause on it. Now you bring the subject back to this committee to say, let's discuss the impact. Well, I want to discuss the positive impact. The elderly will be able, and the elderly and the infirm will be able to get to hospitals without cost. I know people who come from Brooklyn into Manhattan to bring their children to school on the Lower East Side. Good for them. They're not going to have to pay to bring their kids to school every day. What about the economic impact? And the EAS that the MTA did addresses like 2 paragraphs on the economic impact. The thing is about 4,000 pages, maybe 1,000 address the issues, and the others are all footnotes. So, and the economic input was not addressed. Chinatown is going to be terribly negatively impacted. From the Upper East Side, you can get down there on the FDR, but you have to exit the FDR. And when you get off the FDR, people are going to say, you know what, I'll stay in my neighborhood Chinese restaurant, your destination restaurants in this town, your museums, the Broadway. Everybody, people from New Jersey that are going to come in, and that's a big portion of Broadway goers. So now they pay for the bridge or the tunnel now, and then they pay for a garage, and they pay a couple of $100 for a ticket, and now they also pay for congestion pricing. This is going to have a big effect on business in Midtown. Now, I don't know, you didn't want to air, or I shouldn't say you didn't want to. And Craig, I commend you for your expertise and for the amount of time and effort you put together for your presentation. I have to say it was a wonderful summary, especially for people who have not been following this issue. I would think that most of us on this call have followed this issue very, very carefully over all these many years. You'd have to be, I don't know, under a rock not to see it in the newspaper every day. And along with those articles in the newspaper every day was the inefficiency, the articles on the inefficiency of the MTA. There was nary a week that would go by that would tell you how they weren't collecting fares, or their project was over budget, or it was over, extended in time. There was nothing but negative financial and otherwise reporting on the MTA. And the sadness is they are an authority. And so they're not an agency. So there's no outside audits here. They have internal audits. If you and I asked for an MTA audit, I don't think we could get it.
Michelle,
So what I'm saying to you, let me sum up. I'll sum up, Chuck. I think I'll sum up. So my point is, if you want to discuss the impact on the pause of congestion pricing, I want to give everybody a chance to talk about the benefits as well. I don't see a reason for this meeting. This is the horse is out of the barn. But anyway, thank you for listening.
Okay, all right. Look, we have a couple of board members.
And if I could just respond to that quickly, because I think Michelle, with all due respect, missed the point of having this discussion. And if you looked at, if you see what it was titled as, it was the impacts of the pause on planned MTA capital projects. And the purpose of that was, as I indicated, we have had plenty of opportunities in the task force, and we have had many discussions, and you have made many of the points that you repeated tonight, which is fine, at the task force meetings. But what we have not talked about is the impacts on capital projects, the real life impacts of the pause and the financial impacts of it, and what it's going to do to projects that were supposed to have been fully funded at this point. So this was something that has not been discussed. This is a transportation committee core issue that we should be talking about, because we talk about all these projects. We talk to the MTA on a regular basis. We have had presentations on the capital plan and on Fast Forward, and we're going to continue to have those. So the purpose of this was to be able to talk about it from a transportation standpoint. We can talk plenty more about other impacts, pro and con, but that is why this was here. And I think it is an important conversation that this committee needs to be on top of as well, because it is something that is going to continue to evolve.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Okay, we have some board members who have not yet spoken. And that's, and then we'll get to, let's see, Ed Hartzog. I don't, is Ed still there? I only see a bridge. Oh, there he is. Okay, Ed, go ahead.
Oh, I've been here, Chuck. Don't worry. I've been here listening the entire way. So real quick, I will stick to money. Let's talk money. I love talking cash. So out of the gate, though, I do want to just throw something out there to remind folks that the congestion pricing did not, under the MOU on the accessibility, that was not part of the deal. So it leads me into the other point, sort of dovetailing with other points made this evening. What I'm most disappointed in, I guess, is after we've sort of had this Donnybrook, we've had this battle royale. We're in court. Everyone knows. I'm a member of Community Board 8. I'm also one of the plaintiffs in a group, New Yorkers Against Congestion Pricing Tax. But what disappoints me is the Trans-Alt Riders Alliance, the MTA, still want to continue to have this battle instead of looking to alternatives. Which, thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Craig. Let's talk about alternatives. And the real thing is the $1 billion. So quick point, I find it very craven by the MTA to come out of the gate and scare the pants off of everybody and say within 32 nanoseconds, hyperbole please here, that the entire capital thing is going to melt down. We're not getting congestion pricing. All these things are coming to a grinding halt. Everybody stop where you are, stop with the shovels, walk off the work site. It's over. That's a little something, please. Okay, let's have a real adult discussion. So first of all, whatever happened to politics being the art of the possible instead of the impossible? And in terms of cash for $1 billion here to just carry us over, how about let's just, grab the fare. If there's 700 mil right off the top, I got another 4 mil for the MTA. Put in a sprinkler out there in Brooklyn, and you're paying people $4 million a year to watch a building not burn. Okay, so I'm sure there's lots of it, and I don't want to go line by line, but the point is, let's have a real discussion about the money. And the fact is that there are other ways to fund this. There are other 9 streams attached to the cabs and the limo services and the for-hire vehicles funding the MTA. So let's have a real discussion about how we find the money in other alternatives. And let's go back to possibly the state doing its job. As the budget has ballooned over the last 20 years, are you telling us that really we couldn't have lost $50 $50 billion along the way in the last 20 years, just from getting from 2000 to here. I mean, the state budget is what, more than doubled, the city budget the same way. So, with all due respect to our elected officials, we know it's tough, we know it's hard, but, let's go back to the drawing board. And, and for the MTA, to use a legal term, you don't have clean hands. In the court of public opinion, the court of equity, in my humble one person's opinion, you don't have clean hands with almost $1 billion going out of the bottom of the bathtub and crying poor. It's really hard. So, and that's all. I leave it to others, but thanks for the discussion, guys. Appreciate it. And let's talk money. Let's talk the MTA. And to that end, let's clear up all this about the two books. Have the MTA come in and let's do a presentation on their funding. That would really help everybody build a little trust, and we can go from there. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ed. Paul Crickler, hadn't spoken before. Paul.
Chuck. I think we should definitely go with what Craig is asking us for. I think people are focused the whole time so far on congestion pricing. That's not what Craig has asked for in this resolution. We have a situation where we have the $15 billion, which is either delayed temporarily or delayed forever. We don't know where the money's coming from. No one in this Zoom can say it's going to come next cycle, the cycle after, or ever. And if it comes next cycle, that means that $15 billion of other work that would have been in that next cycle will not be there. So there's no free lunch here. And that's why I think we should be looking at ways we can get maybe the state to, or the governor who caused this, come up with the money. But we shouldn't just be focusing on the congestion pricing assessment. We've all bored ourselves and each other. We're never going to change anybody else's minds on this call. Those who hate congestion pricing, not going to change their minds. Those of us who want to have it won't change our minds. I'm just asking this board, please, can we focus on exactly what Craig is asking for and not keep on litigating congestion pricing? It's wasting everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, let's go back to, and Barbara Rudder has not spoken. I don't want to neglect Barbara.
No, please don't. I want to thank the two of you for holding this meeting. And I will start off saying that I did hear there was a resolution among all the community boards that were around. I do not understand why we didn't get that same letter from all of the other community boards. I think it would have been helpful, and I don't want to ask why. I do believe—
well, I can address that for you, but go ahead and finish your comment.
No, yeah, let me finish, please. I'm sure there's a good reason for it. I don't want to talk about the pluses. I'm very much for congestion pricing, and to say that has no invite that it's going to be bad for the environment. I remember during COVID when we looked out and the birds were flying and the sky was blue. It is torturously hot. We're going through very bad times, and anything we can do. To say that the governor finally, after years and years and years, listened to people. I'm sorry, I may be saying something that's not right, but it may be a slight coincidence that she was holding a $10,000 plate fundraiser with the auto dealers that may have made her listen to the community a little bit more. It is unconscionable, in my opinion. I would like to have a resolution. All the whereases can come from Liz Kruger's very brilliantly and articulately and unemotionally listing of all of the consequences of what has happened, to say that the last minute everything went through. And Craig, for all of the money that you think it's going to last, the longer we wait, if we ever will do it, as we did have the Second Avenue subway in our district, will be that much more expensive. And I know you want to talk about only those subways that are affected in our area, but don't forget we travel. So every station that's affected and every bus that is affected affects all of us. So we go all over. So I hope we do have a resolution that asks pleads, whatever the word is, for the governor to reinstate it, and quickly, or the legislator to reinstate it and select it. I found it absolutely unconscionable, and everybody just wants to reiterate what my grandmother would have called Bubba Mises, and I call the Chicken Little with the sky falling, that everybody's going to be driving around. We've heard it already. We heard years, everybody, including those that suddenly claim they saw the light, were all for it. And now all of a sudden it went through, and it's just something so disturbing with our elected officials. And I know who I won't vote for.
Okay, okay.
I think
Can I
just the fact that
respond?
I just think the
Oh.
fact that you got you got the Yiddish word Bubba Meister in there was the highlight of the evening for me.
Can I
Doesn't
just,
take much.
okay, I just want to, the letter that Barbara Rutter is referring to was a letter that was circulated amongst community boards below 60th Street. In the end, it wasn't signed by every community board, and I think somebody from Community Board 3 District was on and said that they actually had a meeting where they decided they weren't going to sign it, and that in response to the letter, they haven't had a congestion pricing task force since it began. And I just want to applaud this board for having one that has been following this issue since the law was enacted. But if I may, Chuck, I just want to say a couple of things. I want to agree with Paul. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss the possible impacts of the pause. I would like to urge, we posted on the website in conjunction with this discussion topic, and Chuck, I don't want to say I told you so, but in terms of how much time we're spending here,
You
but
could say it. You could say it.
but you know, no good deed goes unpunished.
Correct.
Right? So we published, or we posted on our agenda the actual last MTA meeting, which Jamie Springer and his colleague, who I can't remember because I actually attended the whole meeting, talked about these capital projects and what might be deferred. And can you just go back to the slide that you showed earlier, Craig, the one on the ADA?
Yes, give me 1 second,
Okay.
please. All right, it's loading now. Here it
Okay,
comes.
so the top part of the slide says the historic ADA settlement is predicated on full funding for the program, but includes provisions for downside scenarios exactly like this one. Okay, so right there in the slide, it talks about the fact that there could be things happening that whatever you thought your original source of funding might be, in actuality, it might turn out to be a different source. So, and they went through all the projects that Craig highlighted, and they talked about possible deferrals. And then one of the MTA board members, Andrew Albert, who comes from Community Board 7, some of you may know him since he's been on the New York City Transit Riders Council forever, asked the question, well, how long does the pause have to be before these projects are adversely impacted? And quite frankly, the answer was, we don't know yet. It's not tomorrow. It's not 3 months from now. It's sometime perhaps in the future. Okay, so it's not like the fact that we're in a pause right now is seriously going to set back any of these projects 4 or 5 years. If these were not considered the must-fund projects in this 2020 to 2024 capital budget, because if they were, they would have been the first projects funded in the 2020 project. They are back in the slide. Let's all remember, we are in June of 2024, okay? And that the capital project band is almost ended. So to Corey Birek's point, we're at the end of the project year, and following up what was said by the regional planners, it's not unusual for things to move from budget to budget. Okay, I understand that, you know, the MTA put all their eggs in one basket here, and they're also using this to try to get people upset. But there are other sources of funding. And the other thing was, you know, when the Second Avenue subway project was mentioned at the meeting, again, another board, because it was said, oh, if we don't get the funding, there's a possibility that we'll lose the matching grants. So someone quite rightly said, one of the board members said, hey, so what's the deadline? and Jamie Springer and Jamie Torres Springer said, or Springer Torres, I apologize, I can't remember in which order, said, well, actually, there is no deadline. So, you know, it was sort of like, are these projects really in trouble or not? But it doesn't matter, because I want to go back to Paul's point, which is, how do we fund these projects? And I think that there are a lot of funding sources out there for the MTA to look at. I think that the governor, despite everybody's, you know, she pulled the rug out from everybody. I go back to her original gubernatorial debate with Tom Suozzi. In that debate, she actually said back then that maybe congestion pricing had to be delayed. Okay, she said that in that debate. So this is not like an unheard of position from her. I'm not going to say why she did it. I don't really care. But there are plenty of other funding sources. They have been published. There's, you know, the fact that Uber doesn't pay any annual fees at all, and they're flooding the zone. I quite frankly am more interested in reducing congestion. And I think there are plenty of things in terms of that item that can be done by the Department of Transportation, local New York City government, to reduce congestion in Midtown. And they aren't doing one of them. They aren't banning, let's say, parking on crosstown streets between, you know, 6 a.m. and 10 and then 3 and 8 to move the traffic into the tunnels and on the bridges. They aren't reducing the number of placards that would put people perhaps back into the subway and Long Island Railroad. They're not doing any of that. So, and other sources of funding, there are tons of them. But I think what I find even more troubling is everyone is so focused on $15 billion of a $58 billion capital campaign that that is actually more than what is usually in this 4-year plan, okay? But nobody has any idea whatsoever of how the 2025 to 2029 plan is going to be funded. So it's a much larger problem than just this missing $15 billion. And I have to think, based on what we got from the presenters on the regional council, is if we didn't all know about congestion pricing, there's probably been a deficit in every capital plan presented by the MTA in the last 40 years that's moved from one capital plan budget to another, and they found a way to fund it. And so I have great faith in the legislature to find the money from somewhere else. And I was actually at a meeting with Gail Brewer today where she actually said that she thinks that there's going to be something announced rather soon. So I don't want, you know, people alluded to Chicken Little. I applaud Craig for going through this, but I think, you know, there's no need to like say the whole plan is out, whatever all these other projects are never going to happen. I think that's going to a total 180 to the other side. There's a middle here, and I think we can all be part of the solution of finding the funding from a source other than one that is in a lot of trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Let's sit. All right, we have two more board members and then we'll call a halt to this. Sebastian, why don't you recognize Sebastian? Here, go ahead.
Thanks, Chuck. I'd actually like to put forward a resolution. I'd like to propose that we call on the governor and the state legislature to fully fund the MTA's 2020 to 2024 capital program.
Is there a second for that? Barbara, are you seconding that? Okay, and Paul? Okay, do you want to say anything more, Sebastian, on that?
Yeah, I think building on top of what many people have said here, this capital program is really important to so many New Yorkers. It impacts our district. We've heard about the accessibility improvements. We've heard about the signal upgrades, the buses. All of these will be able to happen sooner if the capital program is appropriately funded. And these are things that impact New Yorkers' lives. And I think that regardless of whether it be through congestion pricing or other methods of funding, as we were just hearing from Valerie, we should send a message to our elected officials that we want them to be funding these important projects.
Lori, next.
I was going to say something about the congestion pricing, and then I decided I wouldn't, and that I would give up my time. But what I'm going to say is, I think, Sebastian, that's a great idea. So I think that we should do that. I think we should pass a resolution, because I don't have any faith that congestion pricing is going to be unpaused, and the fact that it's not going to solve our congestion problems and all the other problems that we've mentioned in this, but it will give the MTA the money that they need to make the stations accessible. So I will vote for it.
Thank you. Rita, next.
Craig, thank you so much for your presentation. What you did, it was really great. I have something personal, and as you all know, I'm short. And so therefore, I only board buses in the front because I can't get up in the back. And my tailor happens to be in the Lower East Side. So I take the bus and go all the way down to Houston Street. And coming back, I do a reverse. I will tell you that I have done this 3 times. I bought pants. I bought this 3 times, and I sit almost opposite to the first door, to the first rear door. And there's still another door on the articulated buses. Nobody, 3 times in a row, 6 rides, nobody pays their fare on getting on those back doors. What can the MTA do about that and get some money to get some of the things that we need? That just, sorry, thank you. But there's money out there. There's money out there, and it's there. It belongs to them.
Rita, I think that that's been a big issue, as you said. I think they've estimated that $700 million is lost because of people not paying the fares. And one of the things they've done in the subway is to try to help with that. And you know, it's the doors that people can go through, not the turnstiles, but they have MTA people posted at those doors to make sure there isn't, you know, that only people are buzzed through who deserve to go through after they've paid the fare. There's still people who jump over the turnstiles, and I think they're trying to crack down on that. The buses, though, is where they've been losing a lot of money, and that really is a problem which they haven't gotten a handle on. And you say that's something that really needs to be done. There's a lot of revenue.
And this is endemic not only on New York City transit buses, but on all bus systems elsewhere. In Westchester County, where I work, it's become a much bigger issue as well. I see it in the data every day. But again, just a reminder that those lost revenues from fare non-payment, fare evasion, whatever you want to call it, affect the operating budget. So if anything, you would most likely see that impact most in terms of future fare increases and what they need in order to just run day-to-day subways. And that is largely separate. And I'm not saying there isn't some relationship there indirectly, but that is largely separate from the capital projects and what congestion pricing revenues were contributing to the capital program. The fare payment, the fare revenue and such was not ever part of that equation.
Thanks, Craig. Let's Judy Schneider hasn't spoken, and why don't we recognize Judy?
Call the question.
Okay, okay. Before we call the question, I want to raise an issue. You said the 2024 capital plan, which is about to end. I guess, I mean, I don't know whether, Craig, you may know this. I mean, if it's not, whether they may not be able to, they may, but they may not be able to fund it in 2024. Should we limit it to 2024 capital plan, or should we say that these projects ought to be funded, if not in 2024, then in the next phase, the next capital plan?
Yeah, I guess that's a question for Sebastian, who raised the who put forward the motion.
I'm happy to go with your expertise on what you think is most appropriate here. Ultimately, it's about these capital projects, whichever capital plan they're in, having them done as soon as possible for our New Yorkers.
What do you think, Craig?
I guess the thought that I have is, right now we don't know that the MTA has not announced its 2025 to 2029 plan. So we're only dealing with the projects that we know about and that were included in the current plan. So I guess it becomes a question of, are we looking to just say that we want those funded at some point, or we want to see immediate funding of the plan to make whole, or to make the 2020 to 2024 capital plan whole, to avoid any deferrals that were that are being proposed.
Let's leave it at that then. Okay. Okay.
Can I make a friendly amendment? And also, can you repeat the resolution to, I want to make sure that my friendly amendment is appropriate. Can you repeat the wording?
Go ahead, Sebastian. Why don't you repeat it then?
That the community board calls on the governor and the state legislature to fully fund the MTA's 2020 to 2024 capital program without delay.
Okay, the friendly amendment that I wanted to make is all of your wording, but saying that they're looking for alternative revenue sources.
Well, he says fully funding. I don't know whether that
Fully funded using alternative revenue sources.
Well, yeah, that seems to fundamentally change.
Well, that it may, but that's for Sebastian to accept it or reject it. It's up to you.
Thank you for offering that. I respectfully decline.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so why don't we, Valerie, you want to comment on this before we?
Yeah, I just want to say that I think the kind of danger with this type of resolution, which I think was sort of the danger of when this board supported congestion pricing without seeing exactly what it was going to be, that we supported the concept. And at the time, everyone had an idea in their own mind of what congestion pricing was going to look like. And then it took, almost 4 years to come into being. This board passed a resolution that basically asked for the rollback of the congestion pricing surcharge that affects this community. And so by putting forward a resolution like this, we're kind of, in my mind, going against what we're asking to be repealed. Because what if the idea of fully funding the resolution is to increase that tax from, $2.75 or $2.50 or whatever it is to $10? And how do we reconcile that?
I don't think that doesn't, well, I think what Sebastian is saying is that we had a capital plan, the congestion pricing has been paused, and he wants to see the capital plan funded. It's up to the legislature and the governor to come up with a plan.
Well, I mean, if I may
claim they're going to do.
Okay, well then let me try this friendly amendment. And the friendly amendment is like, okay, fully fund the program, but something to the effect of, you need and recognize that you need to look beyond congestion pricing at this point. Like, it's saying that for, whatever your feeling about it is, it's stuck. So don't like try to waste time with lawsuits in terms of trying to make the governor do it, but come to the table and find an alternative, whether it's, making those projects the first that are funded in the 2025 to 29 capital plan, or exploring, maybe exploring all the possible funding sources to promote the 15 billion or whatever it is.
Valerie, if I may, I think what Sebastian is saying does that, because first of all, the congestion pricing program is in effect right now. It's paused. The governor has said it's paused, and there's an issue of whether she has the authority to do that, and that's for us to get into. But that's what he's saying. Find a way to fund it. I think what's implicit in that is you have congestion pricing, that's paused. So find a way to fund it. And I think it speaks for itself, at least the way I interpret it, and given the present landscape.
Right, and I was going to just say that if there is a time where a specific proposal is put out there, we can certainly address that and try to comment on it. At this point, we've seen how attempts to find alternative funding have gone. They haven't really gone anywhere, and maybe that's going to take some time. And maybe there are ways where whoever may be able to help, and the state legislature and the governor will play a major role in that. But they have the leverage right now.
I should point out that Judy had urged us to call the question, and I think
okay, well, I guess my friendly amendment, even though Sebastian I'm just trying to get to a point where, the last time we passed a resolution like this supporting congestion pricing, then when we tried to go back and try to look at it, when we had the specifics, everyone said we couldn't go back because we already supported a resolution supporting congestion pricing. So if we say go ahead and find alternative funding, and it comes back and it says, well, we're only gonna, here's how we're gonna do it. We're gonna increase the taxes of the people who live above 60th Street, only in Community Board 8. Like, are we stuck? I just don't understand. I just want to understand that. Because right now we're paying for a congestion pricing surcharge that primarily only affects people who live below 96th Street. Between 96th Street and the rest south of on the island. So
Valerie, if I may, thank you for that friendly amendment. I'd like to keep it as it is, and I think that it can
all right,
stand,
I appreciate that.
Okay. Why don't we take a vote here? All right. So let's
lower hands, please, so I could just make sure I have.
Yeah, make sure you have everybody here.
Yes. So we have. Wait, Ed, if you could just put your hand down, because I want to just make sure everything is in the right order. Thank you. So it's myself, Chuck, Sebastian, Barbara, John McClement, Judy, Lori, Michelle, Paul, Rita, Robin. Let me go down the list a little more. TJ, Valerie. Did I miss anyone who is a member of Community Board 8?
Okay, so we have everybody. All right, so if you're in favor of this resolution, you don't have to do anything. If you would like to vote no, or abstaining, or not voting for cause if there's some issue, raise your hand. Okay, Ed Hurtson.
Trying to ask a question. You keep putting my hand down before we went, so I'm going to ask a question now since you basically cut me off.
We're voting, Ed. We're voting here. Come on.
Sorry, Chuck. Look, what are we living in here? I'm trying to ask a question.
Ed, we're voting. Come on, we're voting already. What do you do?
Chuck, Craig, I know this is hysterical. I'm trying to figure out what I'm voting for. I had my hand up. You went over me twice, and so you just bull rushed me here. So
no. You want to know what we're voting for?
No.
Sebastian, why don't you state your resolution?
I'm trying to ask a simple question, which you wouldn't let me do beforehand, and this is gumming it up even more.
The question had been called, Ed. The question had been called.
Yeah. So the question. Look, Chuck.
What's your question?
I'm trying to find out from Sebastian, poor guy wasn't the only one who could talk there with Valerie going, is that what they're basically saying with this resolution is that the legislature in their wisdom could come right back under this resolution and jack up the 9 taxes we already have on for-hire vehicles to whatever number they want, or come up with some other crazy idea that they might have in order to fill this gap. I don't want to hear about the policy of it. I just want to know if that's yes or no, what it is. Because if it is a possibility for that, then I will tell you right now, I'm voting no.
Okay, as I understand it, and Sebastian.
How about let Sebastian tell me? Since
That's Sebastian. Go ahead, Sebastian.
Okay.
It's a resolution.
The text that I'm proposing remains, that the board calls on the governor and the state legislature to fully fund the MTA's 2020 to 2024 capital program without delay.
That's all. That's the resolution. And whatever, that's it. Up to the legislature and the governor. Could be anything, right? So, Ed, are you voting then?
No, it will be no.
Okay, that's fine. Michelle?
No.
Okay, Valerie?
Abstain.
Say, Robin?
No.
Anyone else? Anybody else? Okay. You got that, Craig? Rita, did you want to vote?
Abstain.
Okay, abstain. And John McClellan?
No.
Okay. Okay. I don't know where we come out on that.
I believe we are at
We have a couple of abstentions.
8 yes, 4 no, 2 abstain.
Okay.
That's effectively 8-6.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Now, what's next? Is this, do we have the, is it Fox 5 next on our agenda?
Yes.
Do we have any, is anybody here from Fox 5, Kevin? I don't see anyone.
Yeah. So,
wrong.
so I spoke with Will, and he said that he was having problems getting in touch with anyone, and he tried to pursue it, and I think he tried to send some emails and they got bounced back. So at this point, we have not had any success in reaching out to them. And we
Okay.
doesn't preclude us from discussing it, obviously. We may want to, if we do take action, do something where we put something forward and don't actually, which use the word of the last hour, defer any vote until after perhaps they see it, and then they have a chance to respond in September before we take any official action. That's one option.
Yeah, let me mention, this is something that has come before us in the past. And what happens here is that Fox 5 is on 67th Street, and they have the whole area in front of their studio where they can park. And that parking is basically for their news vans and things like that. But there's always a lot of people parked there who are not necessarily the news vans, but maybe Fox people. And there's a lot of double parking of vans and others, and that's been a big issue. And years ago, we had someone who lived nearby who came before our committee regularly, and I don't know if anybody else is on the committee who remembers that, but he came, and as a result of his complaints, we limited some of the press parking around Fox 5, not right in front of Fox 5, but they had other press parking, and we did away with some of that press parking to try to crack, and it got better. And now we've had complaints from someone who lives right near there that there's a lot of double parking and a lot of problems, and he's written letters and he's very frustrated that nothing's happened. So what I would suggest is that we ought to put it on for our next meeting. And what we ought to put on though is reducing, reducing the parking in front of Fox 5 to penalize them for not policing the situation that they should police. And I think that may be, and then we could put that on our agenda, send that out to them, and maybe that will get their attention, just like we did on, with the Fairway on 86th Street when we took some action and we suddenly got them. They said, "Hey, there's somebody here, something happening here, and we want to be helpful," and they were helpful. I see there's a Russ Novak. Is that the? Could we unmute Tim? Is he possibly from Fox 5? No. Oh no, he's the person who complained about this. That's correct. So why don't we let Russ talk about his situation here so we can hear it. You can correct me if I'm wrong in summing up the situation, or say whatever you want. Russ.
Thank you, Chuck. You're right. I've been in front of this community board before my hair went gray. I've been living on this block since 1995. This is about my 5th, 6th, 7th appearance before the community board on this issue. It's never gone away. And in fact, Chuck and members of the board, it's gotten even worse than it's been in years. I can tell you, I live on the block. I live on 67th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue. And I can tell you this, that the double parking runs from 2nd Avenue to 3rd Avenue, mainly in the morning, and it lasts all day. Now, Fox used to say to you and to us that these are just temporary double parks for the news vans to come and go, pick up reporters and news crews and so forth. That's not the case. These are civilian cars. The SUVs, they don't even have vans anymore. They use SUVs, and they park there for a while, for hours sometimes, waiting for assignments to take the reporters out to places where the news is happening. The larger problem has to do with employees of Fox who are not reporters, who are not working, covering the news. I don't know, the business side people of Fox are double parking in front of on 67th Street all day, 9 to 5. Usually starts at around 6 in the morning because I'm out walking my dog. Runs from 6 in the morning to about 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And none of these cars are parked legally. None of these cars have any authorization. Most of those cars do not have press plates. And in fact, even if they did have press plates, that's an illegal use of the press plate, because if you have a press plate, it's only good to park wherever you like at the site of a newsworthy story. There's no newsworthy stories on 67th Street. It's not a crime scene. It's not a fire, things like that. So that's clearly not the intended use of a press plate. But most of the cars that are double parked do not have press plates. And the aggravating thing is this: a lot of these cars have tags hanging from their rearview mirrors that say Fox 5 essential employee. Now, I get that 2 years ago when there was COVID, there's no longer a pandemic, they're no longer essential workers. And in fact, to call these people have these folks call themselves essential workers, when, down the block across the side of 3rd Avenue, you have firemen and policemen who are like risking their lives every day. Those are the essential workers, not somebody pushing a pencil at a desk at Fox 5 TV. It's a little bit ridiculous. And these aren't even regular government issued placards. These are Fox issued hang tags that are hanging from their rearview mirrors. So that's the problem. It's gotten really bad. And what's even more irritating is that the police do no enforcement. It's non-existent. I live here. I see it. I see police double parked in front of Fox when there's a noteworthy politician, giving an interview to the news people over there. They're not giving tickets. The 67th precinct is right on the other side of 3rd Avenue. They're not getting tickets. They're not issuing tickets. It's run amok, honestly. It's run amok and there's nothing happening. I mean, and think about this. You know, you have a firehouse on the other side of Third Avenue. You have a police station on the other side of Third Avenue. There are hospitals in the area. The police vehicles and the fire trucks can't get through a lot of the times because of the double parking, not to mention the 67th Street Crosstown bus, which is stuck there. If you have double parking and another car parked on my side of the street, which is the south side of the street, the bus can't get through. There was an elderly man, he's in his 90s, lives on my floor, had an ambulance call, and the ambulance couldn't get through to do a medical run for the guy. It's really unfortunate. So that's the long and the short of it. You know, I appreciate the board giving this attention, and I appreciate you looking into it, and you know, I welcome your assistance in stopping the problem, because it's back and it's worse than ever. And there's a side issue now, which never happened before, which is happening now, is that the Fox people are parking in the bus stop on the corner of 67th and 3rd Avenue by the Vineyard Vine store. I would ask, I would invite actually all of you, all the community board members, to take a walk on 67th Street anytime you like. In the morning is usually where it's most rampant, where you can see the Fox employees' cars double parked the length of 67th Street and in the bus stop. So the 67th Street bus, can't even pull into its own bus stop because there are cars parked in that bus stop, and also in front of a fire hydrant. Just throw that in for good measure too. So that's, you know, that's where we are with this, and I think some action should be taken. I think the 19th precinct should be called to account. I think the people at Fox should be called to account, and I appreciate, whatever action and decision the board may choose to make here.
Thank you, Russ. We'll see.
Thank you.
I think we need to get their attention, and they, you know, they have to commit to doing some policing of that, which obviously is not happening.
The question, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chuck, but the question I would really like to have answered is, why do the Fox employees think that they could just double park there all day for the length of their workday? Who gave the information? Who said that this was okay? And what sort of authority does Fox 5 have to break the law like that?
Yeah, well, I think we want to get their attention and get them here before us, and then the action that we can take would be to change the parking regulations in front, which we have done. And if we do change that, that would hurt them clearly, and it would make it available to other people, and so they wouldn't just, you know what I mean? And they don't want that. So then I think we would get some new policies where they would tell their employees that you can't, that, you know, that the administrative employees can't park there. And we might get some action, because you know, over the years I've found that those are the kinds of things that work, and it doesn't work. Just calling for more enforcement, it's very hard to get the police to do that. And if they do it, it's only for a short period of time, and then things go back to the way they were. So you have to try and change the situation and get the attention of the management at Fox 5 so that they will make some internal changes. So anyway, yes, Alex Killian, anyone would like to comment?
So I also live on the same block with Russell, and we have a garage in our building. Nobody can navigate into the garage entrance because of the double parking. And like Russell said, the bus stop area is double parked. There's a ton of trash on the street that's never ever swept because the vehicles can't get past. And also they can't go near the entrance of our building to either pick up somebody or drop somebody off. More importantly, we did have a fire once in our building. The ambulance couldn't get down the street to get near the entrance to our building. So it's a hazard, and the police never come down, or the ticket people never come down our street to regulate any of the double parked vehicles. Or, yeah, it's an issue and it's been ignored for many, many years.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, let's hear from, I think, Michelle, you wanted to comment, and then Judy.
Yeah, I too remember this coming before us many, many times, frankly, because it's been quiet for a little while, meaning that we haven't heard from you. My assumption was that it was better, but I realize you can't spend your life making these reports. What I would like to suggest, in addition to asking Fox to come, Chuck and Craig, maybe we can ask a representative of the precinct to come. We can ask for the community liaison person. They are responsible for enforcement. And maybe if we ask them to come and talk to us, they would have an opportunity, they would understand that we're on this and we're looking at this. So we're not asking for enforcement as some kind of a vague entity. And if they could come and be here and Fox comes, then that would, and the neighbors, and I assume this was posted, so maybe you can get more of your neighbors to come as well. But I think that would be helpful because they would all be in the same room. So I would like to propose that we ask a representative. And then if Fox doesn't show up, well, that tells the police representative a lot and tells the community a lot, because then they will have had a second opportunity to come.
I guess it may be traffic enforcement that we have to get, but we'll get the right people, right?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
whoever it is.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. Judy?
Yes, and to continue along those lines, I think we need to have a meeting, and maybe you and Craig need to meet with Fox, with the police, with the DOT, very important for parking regulations there. I think Barry was your co-chair when you did this many years ago, and I remember them agreeing to have, and they did have, a person out there regulating the traffic, which they obviously are no longer doing. So they are breaking an agreement that they had made many years ago by not having somebody out there watching the parking and watching what's going on. And before it comes back to the board, it might be better if you got the various people together in a private meeting rather than a community board meeting. You and Greg might think about that.
Well, can I just jump in and say
we did that the last time, and that's how you came to an agreement.
I don't think so. I tend not to like private meetings. I think we ought to act as a.
Okay. Well, I think we definitely should have the DOT included in this meeting, Colleen or somebody.
I agree. DOT ought to be there. At the hearing stuff.
And they have not kept their agreement that they made the last time with us.
No, that's
because
correct.
this person is no longer available.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm sure they have new management and they're, and whatever.
Maybe we should,
Yes,
I'm sorry.
No,
I agree with you, Chuck. There's a fine line about how many people you can have in a meeting before you're violating the open meetings law. But maybe we can send a letter to the precinct. I mean, what we don't know, to be honest with you, is the police could be writing tickets all day long and they don't care. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just the cost of doing business and they're going to keep them there. So whether their placard is official or unofficial, it doesn't really matter. So maybe we can, we can invite them back, and we can invite, DOT or whatever to come back and just, but in the meantime, just get some reconnaissance on whether the precinct and quite frankly, I don't even know if it's the precinct who is writing the tickets, because the whole traffic enforcement is a whole nother.
Right, exactly.
Whether we can get some information as to whether any of those cars are being ticketed.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's probably a good idea, that we ought to write a letter to DOT, traffic enforcement, and 5 and send that to them, send it to their management, and say, look, this is a problem that's been ongoing and it's come before us, and we want you to come to our next meeting, and we need to see improvement here, or we're going to urge changes in the regulations that it directly impact your operations. And so why don't we do that? We'll put our heads together on a letter, Valerie, and you should sign off on it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think we could, I think we can agree to do something like that. Michelle, do you want to comment further? Yeah. And I'll get back to
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the reason I'm in favor of them coming to a board meeting is because if you wanted to make a resolution that would impact the signage, it has to be at a committee meeting and then go to the full board. So it's best if all the parties come here to this forum.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, over the years, I have not wanted to do private meetings with whoever it is. I think it's important to come before the committee and let it be aired out publicly.
Right.
Last word for Russ. Go ahead.
Thank you for giving me the last word. Just a couple of points based on things others have said tonight. There was, as I think Michelle brought up, a prior agreement that they would have someone out there sort of directing traffic or expediting things. They do have someone out there, one of their security people stands out there every morning and does nothing, smokes cigarettes, talks to the girls walking by, things like that. Threatened to have me arrested for taking pictures, and I told him to go right ahead in court. And it's really ineffective. The other thing I would suggest to you folks is that you invite somebody from the MTA down. If there's a local, whoever's in charge of routing the M66 bus, and they can talk about the problems they're having. Picking up passengers from the bus stop on the corner. That would probably help.
Mm-hmm.
And,
no, good thought. Good thought, Russ. Yeah.
And otherwise, just as the last word, I do appreciate the board taking action on this. This is a very important problem, and obviously, as most of you recall, this has been going on for a generation already. So it's really
well, we did have improvements. If believe it or not, they were improving for a while, but they've obviously backslid in this. So I think we have to get attention again.
I appreciate your interest in this. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. I don't think we have anybody from, is Colleen? I don't think she's here anymore, is she? Do we know?
No, she's not here anymore.
Okay. Is there anything else that we have? Just any other business that we have here? Okay. Todd.
Yeah, sorry, Chuck. I think I misunderstood and I ended up voting yes, and I was trying to vote no on the resolution, so I apologize. But as I realized,
resolution now,
this,
the last one?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it shows as yes.
Okay, sure. We'll register you as no.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm going to also jump off now because I'm actually having surgery in the morning, so I just wanted to get that in.
Oh, sure. Thank you for attending, Todd.
Yeah, thank you.
All the best for your surgery.
Okay, thank you.
So if we change that vote, then that changes the outcome of the vote.
Right. I understand.
So I don't know.
We basically have a tie vote, so we have no resolution, essentially.
Correct.
Okay. So
and then I guess then the question becomes, what do we do at full board?
We'll go to the full board. We'll report to the full board, and we'll see if anybody wants to do it.
Okay, but we'll still report that this vote occurred. And
right. Yep. Okay. Anything else? Are we ready to adjourn? Michelle, motion to adjourn. Okay. Valerie, seconds. Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. See everybody at the full board or whatever we're at the next meeting.
That would be the full board next week.
Right. Next week. Exactly. Take care.
All right, good night.